so that I've been walking. Don't seem to have no end, and I've never met a single man yet that I...
Hello, friends. Happy holidays. Before we begin the episode proper, in case you didn't hear the last bonus interview episode, I wanted to share with you that directorsclubpodcast.com is no longer the website where you can follow and find the show. No. It is now available all in one place. directorsclub.substack.com. Becoming a subscriber gets you all the latest episodes of the show, along with reviews and written essays, all sent to your email in newsletter form. So now all future content is found there and there only. Felt like streamlining things, and it also felt silly to continue paying monthly for our website when most of the engagement and enjoyment I get is using Substack, where I have a decent number of followers, and they're enjoying essays on music and film, movie reviews, both old and new. So there will be plenty more of that in 2025, including a format revision to this here show. So I don't get burnt out. And, I have a busy schedule, including a full-time job. And I'm also working on my own mental health documentary, so I've decided to go back to the old format of 2 films per episode per director, with kind of a brief summation towards the end where we run down a couple more titles like we did in the past. That's how Patrick and I first started. If you go all the way back to episode 1 in the Cameron Crowe show, we just covered 2 films, and it'll be more manageable and allow me to sort of keep up with all my projects. So hopefully none of you are too unhappy with this decision, especially if you go, I know some of you started out with the Days of Brad Now possibly, and, they covered nearly everything, if not everything. And then there was a period of time when we tried to cover as much as possible. And certainly Patrick and Bill have done that. But the guests, they're always welcome to talk more titles after the 2 main reviews for future episodes. I just, again, needed to streamline and condense the challenge of, binge watching, because it's realistically, I can only do a couple films per show. And this will ensure I can keep things going. There's still a ton of filmmakers I want to talk about, guests to ask back on the show. And hopefully you'll get more content this way if the shows are maybe shorter. But have no fear. The Best of 2024 episode is coming up with Bill Ackerman in probably a couple of weeks. And the 1995 retrospective tradition I do with Colin and Eric, that's coming up in a couple months. That usually goes quite long, as expected. So, thanks everybody for your continued support, for listening, and for subscribing, free or paid, at directorsclub.substack.com. And now on to the episode proper, with a delightful discussion on action star and director Jackie Chan. Hello, everyone, and welcome to an action-packed episode of Directors Club that you hopefully walk away from unharmed with no bones broken. I am your host, Jim Laskowski, and nothing says Christmas like running through a mall and sliding down a pole of lights. Not once, not twice, but maybe 3 times. So I'm thrilled to introduce 2 special guests to talk all about the work of the legendary Jackie Chan. First, we have a returning guest. Hasn't been on in a while, but he's a genre enthusiast and host of Genre Grinder, a dear friend, Mr. Gabe Powers. Hey, Gabe.
Hello. Yeah, it's been a long-ass time. I can't remember when last time I was on here. It was Fulci.
Yeah, I think it was Fulci. You're right.
That was like during lockdown, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Such a good episode.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And secondly, a newbie to the show, but definitely won't be his last appearance. Co-host of Fearless Pretender, a podcast all about Jennifer Jason Leigh. Please welcome to the show, Sam Inglis.
Hi, Jim. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Yes, I'm so glad you're here. we connected on that wonderful podcast that you co-host. And I know you've got a lot going on. I'm sure you do have other podcasts in the works in the future. We'll talk about that for sure. But since this is your first appearance here, just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, like your origin story, how you became a cinephile. I'd be very curious to know about that.
Yeah, I grew up in a household that didn't have a TV a lot of the time to begin with. But then when I was about 10 years old, we moved where my folks are now. And my neighbor was an older gentleman and was a big film buff. And he started showing me a couple of things. And then as I was starting to get into movies that way, I had to go into hospital for my liver transplant. And there's not much to do when you've just had a liver transplant and you're in an isolation room for 6 weeks. So my school, in probably the most useful thing that my primary school did for me, got me a TV VCR, like all in one. And I think we ran through most of the suitable stock of the local video shop down the road from the hospital in that time. And I kind of never looked back since then.
Wow. Yeah, that's remarkable. I think we all have had interesting brushes with health-related stuff.
I was just going to say, Jim, did you know when you teamed us up that we're both transplanters?
No, really?
Yeah, I've had 2 bone marrow transplants.
Oh, wow.
As an adult, though. I was in my 20s, but still, it's a weird coincidence.
That is pretty remarkable, yeah.
And I have had my lower left lobe of my lung removed due to a very rare fungus. Senior year of high school that almost killed me. Yeah, it's
sometimes.
Yeah, no kidding. It's called blastomycosis, and I was actually in the hospital for over a month. And yeah, it was a fun time there. But I was pretty doped up. I don't remember a lot of it. But I mean, obviously, I'm sure I watched a lot of movies on TV. I just can't remember specifically which ones. And yeah, that's a whole other story for another show.
One that I do remember, because I had seen Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and been a big fan of that before going in, was I saw Pump Up the Volume while I was in hospital. And yes, I know you're a fan.
To say the least.
Quite an experience as an 11-year-old.
Yeah, and that's, well, geez, I saw it when I was 12, and as most people know, it saved my life. It introduced me to a very serious crush, as a lot of people know.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, and of course, it was just the right movie, the right time, the right place, exactly what I needed. And being able to tell the filmmaker himself just like how much that movie means to me was just one of the highlights of anything I've done in terms of film related work. So yeah, no, it's pretty remarkable to think like, yeah, I mean, I know at recovering, I certainly rented tons of VHSs at the time from the local video store and just binged on as much as I could. And yeah, it's a miracle that we all made it through our crazy health issues at the time.
My only real memory is watching the Empire anthology movie Drunken Master on early Netflix streaming. I brought my whole computer with me because I knew I was going to be in there for a month or so. And that is not a special movie. But it's very interesting to watch when you're doped up. It just makes no sense. Yeah.
The other one that makes an impression, and I've still never watched it since because it was one of the worst nights of my life, was I had a severe, you can cut this if you want, by the way, I had a severe drop in my platelets, which is what makes your blood clot. And I managed to fall off my bed while watching the Disney Pinocchio.
That movie's a nightmare anyway.
Yeah, and rip out, by falling, all of the cannulas in my arm, blood everywhere, and of course it wasn't clotting. So it's like this nightmare. My mum went to try and find a doctor and fainted in the hallway. So yeah, we don't love Pinocchio in this house. It's not its fault, but it just feels a bit cursed.
It's already kind of cursed. Like, you don't even need the tragic story behind it. That movie that disturbed me, and I was a healthy child.
You can cut that if you want.
Oh, no.
Bit of a digression, but
I'm a big fan of digressions, as most people know. But we can get right to it because I know there's a lot to discuss. I'd like to start with a quote from someone named Cinema Void on Letterboxd, who sums it up very nicely with saying, "Jackie Chan, the perfect middle ground between Buster Keaton and Steve-O."
What is Jackie Chan's favorite stunt? So many. I've been making more than 200 films. Probably Project A, jump to the rooftop. Police Story, jump to the shopping mall. Super Cop, jump to the helicopter. Oh, that's too many. Cannot remember. Answer, what is Jackie Chan's favorite color? Black. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, it's interesting going back to a lot of these films that we're going to cover, because I think, like a lot of us, my first exposure was after Tarantino emerged, post Pulp Fiction. I just basically began seeking out all the films that he was citing as his favorites, and it started with like Sonny Chiba and Bruce Lee, and anything that came out on his Rolling Thunder label. But of course, Rumble in the Bronx came out, and then I was just like, oh my Lord, who is this guy? And I need to see as much as I can. And, a lot of them, I don't necessarily remember going back to the video store and like seeing the old ones that we're going to talk about, like his directorial debut and everything subsequent to that. But yeah, I just find it really fascinating to see like his roots and then how it evolved. But my earliest experiences were seeing things that were definitely recut and re-released and in different versions. I mean, there's a lot we're going to get to in terms of alternate titles and just a wide array of different, types of Jackie Chan movies that, at the time when I first was exposed to him, I just kind of went, wow, this is just cool and entertaining and fun. But, in terms of his history, it's interesting to learn that, like, God, he had a rough childhood going on. Like, it was kind of devastating just to see, like, he was sold to the Chinese opera company, and like from age 6 to 16, him and his classmates were basically just like forced into breakbacking labor and these training regimens and being deprived of food if they didn't live up to their master's expectations, and just like, it's kind of the worst, that you can imagine. At the same time, he's like embracing his talents and acrobatics and all the things that, he would go on to excel in, probably as an outlet, and it's just,
yeah. And as terrible as the methods may have been, as exploitative as it may have been, it's also the reason we have these movies.
Sure.
The reason these movies don't exist in the same way now is that, for good reasons, the training is just not the same. And therefore the people doing it don't quite excel in the same way, I think. This is a purely generational thing, I think. The movies that were produced in the period that we're going to talk about, and maybe just before and just after, but there is this generation of talent defined by the group that Jackie was a part of, the Seven Little Fortunes, I feel, and their sort of wider peers, that you're never ever going to be able to reproduce what they did, because the method for generating it simply does not exist anymore. And we can talk about whether it should or it shouldn't, and it probably shouldn't, but that's still true.
Yeah I mean, it and plus, just like I was talking about, it served as an outlet in things that he would later go on to excel at. I mean, clearly, seeing someone like Buster Keaton, who's obviously the biggest influence, I'd say, on him. But like, once he started pursuing just the world of entertainment, like the filmmaker he eventually kind of formed a relationship with was Yuen Woo Ping. Again, we're terrible at pronunciations. But yeah, I mean, people will recognize that name as the action choreographer who did things like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and The Matrix. So, hooking up with him early on is a huge plus.
And again, like Jim said, I'm going to apologize up front, both for the fact that I am going to make pronunciation errors, and some of them are like pronunciations that I've heard on commentary tracks over the years that I might have got wrong, or other people might have got wrong. I don't know. It might be Mandarin, it might be Cantonese pronunciation, it might be a mix of the two. I don't speak either of those languages. So please pardon me for any pronunciation errors. It is not meant to insult anyone or to,
it's not meant disrespectfully.
Yeah,
Right.
It's not meant disrespectfully. In fact, I've tried to do my homework on it, but if I've not got it right, then it's nobody's fault but mine. But
If anybody's listened to my podcast, we know that I can barely pronounce European romantic language things, that are close to English. So I'm absolutely awful at Asian languages.
I am too. And it's just, I mean, this goes back to the beginning of the show. We sort of acknowledge that. And I think people are very forgiving, hopefully. I'm as white as they get. But no, it's again, like I'm talking about, and, it could sort of just transition into like our first experiences. I think, again, just seeing him throw caution to the wind, even if he puts himself at serious risk for injury, all in the service of, just great escapist entertainment. Part of me is, feels a little conflicted about where his career sort of transitioned into the Americanized, world of Shanghai Nights and Chris Tucker and all that. But like, there's no denying his screen presence, even in the midst of all that. And I just, remember my first experience of seeing Rumble in the Bronx and kind of going, wow, I've never seen anything like this before. And of course, this was before I discovered silent film or things like Buster Keaton and Harold Lloyd and things like that. But it's just, it's from Rumble in the Bronx onward, whatever movie was coming out, I just went out and saw, like, including, Operation Condor, which we'll get to. And again, different version for sure, that was released in theaters. And I admit, I'm often kind of confused by how many versions and alternate titles and recuts and dubs versus subs and all these things.
I mean, that also just goes to the fact not only that they re-released those movies in the 90s, but also that Hong Kong movies for a long time there had to be set for several different audiences, English speaking and Cantonese speaking and Mandarin speaking, and then there would be Japanese cuts and
But I just assumed that because Dimension was a sub-label of Miramax that Harvey Scissorhands got his,
The music was always the thing that bothered me about those in retrospect. Like at the time I didn't know, but changing the music is a really big problem for, especially Drunken Master 2. I remember I still
don't think there's an extant English-friendly version of Jackie Chan's First Strike, which is actually Police Story 4.
Right. Oh. Yeah. See, I've only ever seen the Miramax version of that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, same. So I'd really like to see the original. I'm hoping somebody gets to that fairly soon.
So Sam, let's just talk a little bit about why you decided, hey, I want to talk about Jackie Chan on Directors Club. Like, what was your first experience seeing a film of his and how you became a fan?
Well, you were saying that yours was kind of through Tarantino's Rolling Thunder label. And in the UK, in sort of the late 90s, last couple of years of the 90s up until mid-2000s, we had a label here called Hong Kong Legends. And a few years before that, a friend had tried to show me a film called The Prodigal Son, which Sammo Hung directed with Yuen Biao. And that's an amazing film. It's one of my favorites now, but I hadn't really appreciated it because he showed me the dubbed version. And so I ended up picking that up and loved it, just completely fell in love with it, and then started just buying a load of HKL stuff. And one of their early releases, I think the first one I got of their Jackie Chan releases was probably Police Story. So that was where I started with Jackie. I hadn't seen Rumble in the Bronx at that point. And hadn't really been interested in Rush Hour. I'm still not really, to be honest. I definitely have a dividing line when it comes to his Hong Kong produced and American produced work. I mean, for instance, I've got a ranking of, I think now, 64 Jackie Chan movies that I've seen. And the first American film on the list, the first American produced film on the list, is at number 26. So, that tells you a little bit about that. And it's not a Rush Hour film.
And it's probably not the Tuxedo, I'm guessing, either. So.
No, it's the Karate Kid. It's the Karate Kid.
Oh, sure,
that has his best performance in it. Let's be fair about that.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty good movie. But anyway. So, I started with kind of the high points, and they started releasing some really good special editions of stuff like Project A. I went back for Drunken Master and Snake in the Eagle's Shadow. But sadly, they, died off. But by then, I had really got the bug. And just recently, 88 Films over here have been doing an absolute bang-up job releasing Jackie's stuff.
Most of it's making it over here, too. 88 Films started doing an American line.
Yeah.
And they've put out almost all their Jackie Chan stuff has made it over here. I don't know who else would have had the rights.
Yeah, well, Eureka have some of the rights over here, so that's why we haven't got the 4K Project A set yet.
Yeah.
But I have.
I just got that. It's really nice.
I have the Eureka Blu-rays, but I want to get the 4K set because there's new cuts, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Good incentive. I got to look into that. Yeah.
Yeah. My friend's got it, so I'm good to borrow it. So. But anyway, so kind of that's kind of where I started. But then, I really got into martial arts cinema, and I've always wanted to do a podcast about Jackie, and I've tried before to get to do other shows where we could do a Jackie Chan episode. But I'm glad that this is the one that's come off, because the thing with Jackie is people always talk about him as a movie star, and he is, he's like a huge movie star, a redefining movie star in his genre.
Mm-hmm.
But because of that, people don't really talk about him enough as a director, I think. And that's what I wanted to really look at here, because I think he's at least as defining in the genre as a filmmaker, and very distinctive as a filmmaker. And you can argue that cuts through the films that he didn't direct in a lot of ways, because, we talk about the auteur theory and usually we apply it to directors. But I think, Jackie is an auteur as a screen presence, in the same way that Arnold Schwarzenegger is an auteur as a screen presence. You're never going to mistake an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie for somebody else's,
Right.
But I think we need to talk about Jackie as a filmmaker, because he innovates a lot. He does a lot in his 14 narrative features that people weren't doing before and have copied a lot since.
Yeah, he definitely laid the groundwork for things to come, and certainly, I didn't delve too deeply into the world of martial arts cinema. It was mostly just like the touchstones, the ones that people all cited as being, the best of the bunch over the years. And, part of me is like, especially once we get to Project A, the thing is, like, I'm treating this episode too, is certainly with having both of you on, is that this could be more of an educational process for me, as much as I enjoyed, all the films that we're going to talk about, to more or less. I was like, I got to explore some more. I definitely have to see some Sammo Hung films, more of them.
The Prodigal Son.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like there's a lot of blind spots and a lot of excitement too to just delve further. Because we're going to start off with the Fearless Hyena. And I think I was even telling my friend Colin, who recently picked up the collection through Criterion, is that I was a little taken aback by the level of silliness at times. It's cartoonish, and it's not to say that's bad, but of course, talking about, like I mentioned with, Rumble in the Bronx, it's a whole other tone, really. When you think about it, that's what I was expecting from Jackie Chan movies in general, and it isn't until Project A to where I feel that's the film that sort of laid the groundwork for things to come in terms of what we come to expect from a Jackie Chan film. But and also real quick, Gabe, what was your first experience? I'm assuming probably you're in the same boat as me.
Yeah, I saw Rumble in the Bronx on video, and I really liked it. And actually, around that time, was that 95? So I'm 15. I'm just old enough that I can get a video rental card with my parents' credit card. Mm-hmm. And we also had cable, and Discovery Channel didn't have any original programming. And so we ended up getting a British series, Jonathan Ross's Incredibly Strange Film Show.
Oh,
and there was both a Jackie Chan episode and a Chewy Hark episode. And those both really intrigued me. So I started trying to find, so I would see I would say I'd see a couple of the Chan re-releases in theaters, but I was mostly trying to find these other movies on video. And so I got really focused on the sort of new wave era and really ignored anything pre 80s for most of my, childhood, teenhood, 20s. And then I started finally going back to some of the Shaw Brothers stuff. And then recently, as a disc critic, every single boutique label has a million Shaw Brothers sets coming out. So over the last, I say 4 years, I've sort of have been forced into a Shaw Brothers education, and it's sort of recontextualized a lot of these. So then I started paying more attention to older Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung, and I kind of went through a period where I was a really much bigger Sammo Hung fan, and he's obviously the superior filmmaker. And then I would watch some of Jackie Chan's movies he made without Hung and say, well, maybe they're actually just different filmmakers. And so I'm kind of educated up to a point, and then I sort of lost my education, and I'm kind of gaining it back. And so I'm learning more about these early films. So that the ones I had not seen either of these first two that we were going to end up covering.
Yeah.
But I had the context now over the last half decade. I've got the context to what's behind them. So I think it was the perfect time for me to see them. I think I wouldn't have appreciated them back when I was 15.
I think Sammo Hung for me is just as good a filmmaker as Jackie. In the West, he's probably a less important one in a lot of ways, just because his films didn't break through in the same way. But I think the difference is that Sammo has a harder edge to him as a filmmaker, and you can see that a lot in the films that he made with Jackie. Sometimes he's trying to channel Jackie's style a bit, like in Wheels on Meals, but when he's casting Jackie in a film of his style, like in Dragons Forever, I think that's when they work really, really well. Well, I mean, I think Wheels on Meals is a masterpiece as well, to be fair. But, that's when he's stretching his friend's talents a bit, which is interesting,
And there's that period of Hung movies that he and Chen were both working on. I'm not a very big fan of the Lucky Stars.
No, me either.
that sort of that level of comedy film is also a thing that I have to connect to Sammo Hung, which is not great on my personal level.
Yeah. So before we get to Fearless Hyena, we should set a bit of the groundwork, shouldn't we?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I honestly had no idea how far back his career went. Like as a child actor, he had little appearances early on too, and including appearing in Bruce Lee movies that I undoubtedly saw around the same time that I was getting into his work. It's like minor roles, but still, he was in them.
He's largely a stuntman in the Bruce Lee films, though Sammo is Bruce Lee's first opponent in Enter the Dragon.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's kind of fun to play Where's Waldo with all the Seven Fortunes in those Bruce Lee, those early Golden Harvest movies. You get to see him in the background sometimes. I
think the most noticeable moment is when Jackie gets his neck broken by Bruce Lee in it's Enter the Dragon that happens.
I believe so. Yeah.
But in terms of his own films, he'd made a couple of like independent things as an adult. And the first place that he got real starring roles was a series of films for the director Lo Wei, who also directed Fist of Fury. And this is the era of Bruce-sploitation. Just after Bruce Lee's passing, and that's when Lo Wei hired Jackie to make New Fist of Fury, in which he plays the brother of Bruce's character from Fist of Fury. It's actually a pretty good film. It's got really good action. The Fist of Fury co-star Nora Miao is in it alongside Jackie. But he never was a really comfortable fit in Bruce-sploitation because he's nothing like Bruce Lee, either in looks or in approach.
Yeah, I saw that one recently for the first time, and it really is sort of an awkward approximation of Bruce Lee in his body. And I agree.
It's a good movie, though. I mean, it's a fun watch.
Yeah.
But I think it's notable that of the films that Jackie made with Lo Wei, the best ones are directed not by Lo, but by Chen Shihua, who was, more closer friends with Jackie, I think closer to his age. Shaolin Wooden Men is kind of formulaic. It actually predates 36th Chamber, but it's that kind of thing. Lots of really good training and fight sequences. And Jackie's sort of amateurish acting of the time is a bit distracted from because his character is mute. Chen Shihua also directed Snake and Crane Arts of Shaolin, which I think is criminally underrated overall. It's still a sort of more vengeful character, but it's the most action-packed film of that era of his career, and it really stands up. It's in my overall top 10 of his work, and it's just fantastic. But the one that we kind of need to talk about a bit more is Half a Loaf of Kung Fu, which kind of points the way a bit more to what he would do in the future. It's a very sort of proto-version of his comedy Kung Fu. Comes just after the success of Snake and the Eagle's Shadow, which was made on loan out to seasonal films by Yuen Wu Ping.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one a long time ago. I wish I had a chance to revisit it, but I remember really liking it quite a bit. I mean, it seemed like that was where it laid the foundation for that, comedic kung fu style that, he would later adopt for everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when he comes back to Lo Wei, he's got a bit more power because he's just had a massive hit.
Right.
So he didn't direct Half a Loaf of Kung Fu, but it's much more his persona. And it's kind of a slapstick spoof of Shaw Brothers conventions. It's very, very silly, even more so than Fearless Hyena. But it's good fun. And again, it's sort of as I say, he didn't direct it, but it's very much the beginning of a style, I think, that you would see him refine. And, this is in 1978, and today we're going in depth on films made between 1979 and 1991. And the progress you see in a very sort of similar style, but the progress you see in his work across quite a short period, all things considered, is incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you mentioned half a loaf of kung fu, I couldn't help but think of the Kentucky Fried Movie movie within the movie with I think it's Fistful of Yen. Is that it? Yeah. That's just obviously complete parody of Enter the Dragon and just kung fu in general, and getting that silly. So I'd be curious to check that one out at some point too, just for the, I mean, obviously I know my reservation is that Fearless Hyena at times I was like, wow, there's boing sound effects. We get really silly at the start here. But it's not to dismiss it either. It's still something that I think is worth exploring, especially if you want to be a completist. But yeah, we'll just start with the Fearless Hyena and the fact that this came out in 1979, and it's again like a lot of these films. It's it starts off with like a grandfather figure who's also a master, and training him and everything, and it's it becomes your classic revenge tale, in that same sense that I always get behind, just because it's simple, and I enjoy. Just like, okay, we know who the main villain is going to be. He's a brutal general that's been slaughtering all the people from his grandfather's clan, and now Jackie's got to go back and, he's got to go and get the bad guys. And basically, we just watch all that happen. But like I mentioned, I was taken aback a little bit for this being my first watch for this episode, because, again, like I just was not prepared for how silly it gets at times. And I'm not saying that, again, as a negative. It just took me a minute to acclimate to how slapsticky and wacky things are. Even seeing Jackie Chan in drag, slapping an opponent with his fake boobs.
I think with Fearless Hyena, it's because the story and the slapstick are very at odds. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, like, the murder of the grandfather is pretty graphic and nasty at times. And there's this sort of brutality to the story, which is about the head of one clan trying to destroy all traces of this other clan of martial arts experts for no real reason, it seems. And there's a certain brutality to that, and to the fact that you almost wish that Jackie had done this story when he was a bit later on and a bit of a better actor, let's face it. Because there's an emotion behind the fact that his grandfather only gets found out because he egotistically puts the real clan name on the martial arts school that he wants to open.
Oh, yeah.
Which allows this guy to find his grandfather. So you kind of want him to be a more complex figure in a certain way, and Jackie's not quite up to that as an actor.
Yeah, it feels like a debut. I mean, just in terms of his beginnings and everything. Like it's a little messy, and like you're talking about, tonally inconsistent, but not in a way that I've ever found dull. It's just, yeah. I mean, I don't want to dismiss, martial arts films in general, or even what we're talking about, focusing on Jackie Chan, in the same way that often I wouldn't say I get restless, but I'm eagerly awaiting the next action set piece, more often than not. I wouldn't go so far as to, like, because I listened to another podcast where they compared it to pornography. Where it's just like, I don't care about the plot. Just get to the action.
I mean, that would be a bad kung fu movie if that was the only part you cared about. It's like a Godzilla movie. The only thing you want to watch is Godzilla stepping on stuff. Like all the good Godzilla movies, you hopefully care about the other shit that's going on too.
Yeah. I mean, in the best case, I want a decent ratio of action to story, you know?
Yeah.
And that's definitely why, like I said, I really like Snake and Crane Arts of Shaolin because, there's no messing about there. It's just, a whole lot of fighting a lot of the time. And, very basic story. But again, I'm good with both, like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is still a great movie, and that's a great movie as much because of the performances as because of the action.
For sure.
So, we can get both in the genre, and we get both, I think, in certain films that we're going to be talking about today. Some less so.
I think, to me, this played out like it comes so close to being a spoof of a Chang-Chi movie. Like the idea that the bad guys are even Manchu, I think, which is a very like the idea of destroying a whole school, but they're also Manchu invaders, and they're like, if you look into the deep politics of the situation, they're stand-ins for the Japanese or something like that because they don't, all the stuff that goes into those Shaw Brothers movies about revenge, and the Jackie Chan part of the story is so separated that it almost felt like he was going to stumble into it, which he kind of does.
Yeah.
And so I was a little bit like, this might have worked better if it was really like the wrong guy in the wrong place kind of situation, which is literally the plot of Miracles. So
yeah.
So I was like, then I watched that one last, and I went, oh, okay, he eventually got there.
Well, I mean, again, we'll talk about the next one as well because it's kind of there too in a certain way. But Jim, you mentioned the sequence where he dresses up in drag, not for the last time.
Yeah.
I like all the different characters that he's playing. I certainly think that's enjoyable to watch. It's just a little jarring to see that. I was like, oh, okay, it's going to go there.
I don't like City Hunter, but Jackie Chan dresses Chun-Li in a Street Fighter 2 fight scene is funny. Yeah. It just is. But that sequence, like, what also makes it funny is the guy he's fighting is flirting with him throughout. and to me, we talk about silent comedy, and we're going to talk about silent comedy a lot, but what that sequence feels inspired by is like Bugs Bunny cartoons where he dresses as a lady to distract Yosemite Sam,
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of cartoon-like antics, but, there's, again, like we talk about with nearly every film, just graceful choreography and the things that he does so effortlessly at times. And it's just kind of amazing to see. And, even like this film isn't as prop heavy, but there's great sword play. There's, a memorable scene involving chopsticks. There's a lot of things to highlight, even if, I think it doesn't stand out as like upper tier. It's still a lot of fun. There's nothing that I would say is, makes it less than other films other than just like, it feels like he's just getting his feet wet.
I love the chopsticks duel. It's really fun.
Didn't he reuse it in some other like American movie or something?
Well, there's a homage to it in Kung Fu Panda.
Yes.
Kung Fu Panda. Yes. See, I knew it was in the back of my head somewhere. That's right.
Yeah, and I think of it as well for like it's not the same, but I would be surprised if there weren't some inspiration in terms of Mr. Miyagi catching the fly in Karate Kid from that sort of thing. So, it's all of these things kind of feed into each other. I do love the sequence at the end because as with all of these movies, the good guy's kung fu isn't strong enough to defeat the bad guy to begin with. So he has to go and train in a new kung fu style. And in this movie, it's emotional kung fu.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is really, really funny, but also like a brilliant display of technique. It's pure pantomime, playing like really over-the-top versions of anger, sorrow, joy, and happiness through fight joy and happiness, kind of similar, but through fight choreography. It's just it's so gleefully silly, and that's something that so many of his best films have in common, I think. There's just a sense of like, even he's enjoying himself in those moments,
Yeah, you can tell.
and it translates.
Yeah, and you enjoy it as a result, right?
I think that the
absolutely.
emotional kung fu part is really, and it's too bad that it doesn't really come into play until that final fight, because it's so good once it happens, that it makes the whole movie. Even so, I would say someone who's watching this and not quite enjoying themselves, it's just got to hang on,
Right.
because there's a really funny final fight.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was looking into the year that this came out, and hold on one sec. 15 minutes. Okay. Sorry. I was looking into when this came out, and there were two other really, I think, funnier movies that did a better thing of mixing this. That was Sammo Hung's Knockabout, and which I just think is almost the same story, actually. Similar story, at least. And then Leung Kar Leung's Mad Monkey Kung Fu, which is something completely different, which is so I think that was in the back of my head, is that I've seen this slightly better, but those are both filmmakers that had already been directing for quite a while, and in both cases doing, I think, choreography for even longer than Chan was doing choreography. So the fact that it comes together at the end is still pretty amazing.
For context for people, because we didn't go fully into it, Sammo Hung is Jackie's elder brother, kung fu brother. He was the oldest of the seven. He was the oldest of the Seven Little Fortunes when Jackie was in that troupe at opera school, and he and Jackie and Yuen Biao still see Sammo as their big brother, and they had been working under him as a fight choreographer. All three of them are in John Woo's Hand of Death, for example. I think all of them worked a little on Hapkido and other things like that. But yeah, Sammo had some more major roles and some more directorial experience as action director and full director. He started with Iron Fisted Monk, which is a really good film as well.
I'm definitely going to explore. I mean, I'm just looking at some of the titles. Enter the Fat Dragon.
That's a fun one. More of his slapstick side.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah. The thing for me about Hung is this super talented guy that was very limited as a performer because of his physicality.
Sure. That's what I'm curious about.
Where Chan had a more standard, handsome, muscular dude. He was short, but they were all short. So he kind of fit in.
I think that's why Sammo's masterpiece is Eastern Condors. Because he cared about that one so much. He got in ridiculous shape for it. And he's absolutely incredible in that. And it's one of my favorite kung fu movies of all time. We're obviously digressing here again, but
But I think this is an important digression. I think that
everybody is in that except for Jackie.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I got it again. Like that's what I mean. Like I'm here to learn too. I want to seek out more, especially in light of just binging on a lot of his work so far. It's just kind of like there's so much more to explore. Like it's just there's so many offshoots and so many. There's obviously the Shaw Brothers. There's so many different arenas you can go into when it comes to this particular genre. But yeah, like I am. Sam, why don't you set up the young master for us? Because I know you mentioned that like we should focus on this one instead of Dragon
actually,
Lord.
I'm sorry, Jim. I have one more thing I want to say.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
This Hyena. I was looking at the credits on IMDb, and Monkey Punch was credited as animator. I got really curious about that because that is the alias for the guy who does Lupin the Third. And I found on YouTube, there was a Japanese release under the title Crazy Monkey that had an animated opening that depicts Chan in a caricature paired with a character who looks like Jigen from Lupin III. And they're in modern dress, and they're on wandered streets, and they're harassing women, like stealing their panties as they walk by and spying on them in the nude. And it literally has animated nudity in it. Like when I clicked on it on YouTube, I had to verify that I was 18 and over. And it's so out of step with the movie itself that it just blew my mind. That I don't know if that's available on the Criterion release. I don't think it is. I don't have that disc.
Is Fearless Hyena on Criterion? Because the box set that they released has Fearless Hyena 2, which is terrible.
I watched it on Criterion streaming, so I wasn't sure if it had a disc release. That might be a good point.
I don't think it
very
does.
strange. As a Lupin the Third fan, it was very strange. And it was actually really well animated, but it was like it could have gone with so many other Jackie Chan movies.
Oh, no, Fearless Hyena is included in that Emergence of a Superstar Criterion collection.
It is? Okay. Because that's a weird box set that has some not great stuff in it. And Fearless Hyena 2 is terrible.
Yeah, I think the Criterion just gets like a big old batch of stuff from a rights owner.
Yeah.
And then crams it all in a set.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Sam, I'd be really curious to hear you set up The Young Master, because I know you mentioned prioritizing this one over Dragon Lord. And I'm certainly glad that you told us to do that, because it turned out to be another highlight for me. So go ahead and sort of set it up and where he was in his career at this point.
I mean, I love Dragon Lord as well, to be clear.
Sure.
But this was the first film that Jackie made for Golden Harvest.
Right.
So it's just important in that respect. You can immediately see the level up in budget and therefore ambition. Especially in how complicated the story is at times.
Mm-hmm.
So Jackie plays Dragon. His names are always very simple. Dragon is in his Chinese name. And he quite often is just playing Jackie or JC in English dubs of his films,
or Kevin.
Yes, Kevin in the Police Story classic dub.
Yeah.
Yes, but yes. So he plays Dragon, and one of his kung fu brothers, Tiger, feigns an accident before a lion dance competition, and Dragon has to take his place. But Tiger isn't injured, and he competes for the other team, who win, and therefore he's thrown out of Kung Fu school. Jackie sets out to redeem his brother, but along the way, Tiger helps to free a notorious criminal, Cam, played by Huang In-sik. And Dragon has to promise the local sheriff, played by Shi Qian, and his son, played by Yun Biao, that he'll capture Cam in exchange for a clean slate for Tiger. I hope I've made that about as not confusing as I can.
You cleared up a pretty complicated movie that I started to kind of zone out plot-wise.
Yeah, no, I did too,
it.
For sure.
I hadn't seen this one before, and I got to a certain point, and I said, you know what? I'm just not going to worry about that part. Because I didn't think
and I can't always retain plot details. That's why, sometimes that's the part that has the most notes. But at the same time,
I had some help.
Oh, of course, that does. Yeah, of course, we always need help. But no, the way it starts out with the lion dance competition, I was just like, oh, this is an interesting, opening, because again, I wasn't expecting it, but it was kind of almost like a nice homage to just like a Shaw Brothers style. And one review I actually read said that Sammo Hung might have had a hand in just coming up with that. But once the opening is done, you get to some incredible fight scenes, and this is where I started to take note of props and just the way he utilizes them, even if it's just a pipe or a pole or a bench or at one point a skirt. Just getting really creative in that sense makes it even more exciting, because that's obviously something going back to when I first saw Rumble in the Bronx, like what he's doing with a ladder or a shopping cart, just like taking things that we all know in real life, just practical things, and utilizing them to his advantage is something that I think a lot of people, that's why they enjoy seeing, a Jackie Chan fight sequence,
If we're talking about props in this movie, let's quickly talk about the fight with the fan. Because not only is it absolutely incredible,
yes,
just in terms of its dexterity, and just incredibly graceful. There's one particular move, and I'm sure you might remember it because it is very, very cool. He throws the fan, flips it, and catches it. That took over 300 takes.
Oh my God.
It's a
more than like
record
Kubrick would
still.
Yeah.
Jeez.
It took more than a day, that move. And there's a great interview where he talks about this scene in rejecting the interviewer's claim that he does things that nobody else can do. And he says, you can do these things, but do you have the patience? Will you take 300 goes at the same movement in order to get it right? And that's the difference between you and Jackie Chan. He will do that. He will do that one fan flip for a day and a half so that it looks right.
Yeah. He's fearless in that regard. He'll just do everything, and get it right. Yeah.
It's just incredible.
And the thing there is I don't think that Shaw Brothers would let them do a whole day of takes of that. I think that that's also a sign of changing times. Though a little bit I know about the backstory of Project A, it sounds like that the people at Golden Harvest even went, you got to fucking move it along, buddy.
Well, Golden Harvest, not Project A, not his longest production for Golden Harvest.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but it's still at the same time, the way that Shaw Brothers was cranking things out, like Chang Che would do 7-8 movies in 1 year is kind of ridiculous. To think that then you could spend a good old Hollywood day just doing one thing over and over again is pretty indicative of changing times.
He's also talked about this in terms of why his Hollywood films aren't as good and aren't as satisfying. Because he gets 3 days to do a fight scene that he'd get 3 months to do in Hong Kong. But yeah, I love the lion dance at the beginning of this movie. I don't know how close it is to actual tradition, but just the intricacy of the movement and even the coordination, because it's 2 people between the head and the body in each team, is just incredible to watch.
Yeah.
But for me, it's a really good demonstration of his directorial ambition beyond just regular martial arts sequences per se.
Yeah, it feels more ambitious
that's what I like.
to me. Yeah,
that's why I liked it, because it wasn't really a fight. There's 3 kicks thrown.
Mm-hmm.
It's really an acrobatic contest.
And also you've got the supporting cast here. This is Yuen Biao's first real major supporting role for one of Jackie's films. And as I was saying, they were both part of Seven Little Fortunes, which also included Yuen Wah, Corey Yuen Kwei, the late Corey Yuen Kwei, sadly. And if you want to see a fictionalized version of all of them and the other Seven Little Fortunes training during their childhood, there's a film by Alex Law called Painted Faces, where Sammo Hung plays a version of Master Yu Jim Yun, and he actually won Best Actor at the Hong Kong Film Awards for that. And the late, great Cheng Pei plays a version of the rival teacher, Madame Fan Fok Fa, whose school gave us Lam Ching Ying and Fung Hak On, who we'll see in a couple of these movies, among many others. So, yeah, that's a fascinating movie.
I think that isn't the story that Hung talked Cheng Pei into coming out of retirement for that role?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, that's because she's from Come Drink With Me, which is probably the best martial arts movie of the 60s. And then
certainly the most important.
Yeah, and then she's the villain in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. So she's kind of
Right.
bookended a whole period of movies there.
And she did some amazing dramatic work in her final years as well. A lovely film called Lilting with Ben Whishaw.
Yeah.
Anyway, to get back to The Young Master, there are two scenes that I think we need to talk about. The first with Yun Biao, that amazing fight, sort of two-part fight with the benches.
Yes, I love that. That's where
It's just
I
the
first
fact
perked
that-
up. Yeah.
It's just the fact that Yun Biao comes out with a bench on his shoulder as if it's like a samurai sword, like Mifune in Seven Samurai. The way he carries his big sword on his shoulder instead of his holster. That's kind of like the feel that he has, but it's a little bench.
Yeah, it's so great. I love Jackie's prop use in all his movies, but it's just so, because the two of them have had so many years, even they're quite young here. Neither of them 30 at this point.
Jeez.
And I think Yun Biao only early 20s as well. And they've already had 15 years rehearsing with each other. So it's just the ease of it, the knowledge of each other's rhythms that makes that scene, intricate as it is and difficult as it would have been to execute, and as many takes as they would have done. It just feels so effortless. It flows so well, and we'll talk about it in the next one. But you can't train that in 3 months before your movie shoots. That takes that kind of familiarity with each other to have that slickness, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I also just like that he learns to use something like a skirt, that he learns from that like encounter with the police chief's daughter, played by Lily Lee. And that, just like how that comes into play later on with another sequence. But yeah, I mean, again, like we talk about this, probably sounded like a broken record a lot, but a high point of the film again is that showdown. It's like, I think 18 minutes long, where God, like Jackie gets pulverized at times to where my jaw was hitting the floor. I was just like, man, and it felt long, but it was still like, oof.
That to me is also kind of a bit of parody almost, because like we were talking about in Fearless Hyena, usually the good guy learns a new kung fu technique and applies it to beat the bad guy. And in this one, it's just sheer attrition.
Right.
It's just getting up every single time and like exhausting your opponent by just refusing to go away. And, there's a funny button on it at the end, but it's just an insane level of dedication. And it doesn't look like Hwang In-sik is pulling many of those punches either. That shit looks painful.
I know. It felt very visceral to me. I was just like, oof. Throughout.
And they share the final fight again in Dragon Lord. It's a kind of similar thing.
And he was I didn't know this, but he was a real Hapkido like grandmaster. Apparently.
Wow.
And I guess it was between him and those I can't remember the actress's name, but she did Hapkido. That I think Golden Harvest was trying to kind of push the idea of Hapkido as like.
Are you thinking of Angela Mao?
Yeah, Angela Mao, trying to make that the new thing, the new hot martial art, and he definitely looks very brutal in this movie in particular.
Hapkido is a great movie, and Angela Mao is an incredible movie star as well.
Yeah, that movie we were talking about, the Bruce Lee exploitation. I think one of the best things come out of that is them trying to do a girl Bruce Lee, because we got Angela Mao out of that, who is not really much like Bruce Lee, but I think they were trying for that kind of vibe with her, and she found her own vibe.
Yeah, my favorite of hers so far is When Taekwondo Strikes.
Yeah.
Incredible.
There is something that you were talking about, Jim, the fight with where he learns the skirt technique.
Yeah.
Not only is that a great bit, but there was a joke in there that really made me think of Stephen Chow movies, where as the fight's breaking out, they destroy I think he's like not a textile, but like a cloth salesman. They destroy his cart, and a guy in a rival like I guess it would be some sort of stall. We'll say, yeah, stall. A guy in a rival stall says, "Hooray! Now my business will make more money." Which is just such a, and then we know that means, oh, of course, his stall is going to get ruined now too. And that just struck me. That's something that Stephen Chow does. Chow does all the time now. And so I don't know. I think that this, probably was one of his inspirations, because he's always calling back to this kind of era.
So in between this film and the next, there were some issues.
I didn't know this until I just read this yesterday. Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, so Jackie wasn't able to be in Hong Kong for the release of Young Master, which was a gigantic hit. And because he was having trouble getting out of his contract with Lo Wei, or rather Lo Wei was trying to insist that he come back. And the way that he ended up getting out of it, the Golden Harvest sent him away for a year while things got worked out. And he did Battle Creek Brawl and Cannonball Run in the US.
Oh, right, yes.
The one notable thing he got out of which was Cannonball Run gave him the idea to do his no goods at the end of every movie subsequently. But otherwise, he's not much of a fan of those movies. But Golden Harvest enlisted the help of Jimmy Wang Yu, who was a connected guy, shall we say. And he and his friends helped grease the wheels with Lo Wei to get Jackie out of his contract. And get him, exclusively with Golden Harvest. And this meant that Jackie owed Jimmy Wang Yu a couple of favors over the years. So he made a couple of very bad movies for him, including Fantasy Mission Force, which has an amazing cast. But
yeah, that's like on those list of like movies you watch during a party with beer and pizza.
It is god awful, but it is still better than The Medallion.
It's an entertaining kind of bad movie, is what I would call Fantasy Mission Force.
Dreadful movie, but that was basically a favor that he owed Wang Yu. And there's a lot more detail on all of that stuff in Jackie's autobiographies, and it's really well worth looking into the whole story. But
some of the versions make it. They just sort of skip over names, and it just sounds like rival triads were vying for the Jackie Chan contract, and that he was sent away to the U.S. into witness protection. Like, I know that's not really what happened, but the way that they describe this story, it's pretty funny. I didn't learn this until just the other day.
So if the Young Master and Dragon Lord are basically Jackie honing his personality in a traditional martial arts setting, Project A kind of starts bringing his films into modernity. With its sort of early 20th century setting. And like you were saying, Jim, for me, it's the first film that has like all of the quintessential elements that one might mention if someone were to ask, what's a Jackie Chan film? And if somebody asked me that, as much as I think there are a handful of better ones that he made, I would probably give them Project A.
Yeah, like about 10 minutes in, I perked up and went, all right, this is the Jackie Chan I know and love. Not to say I didn't enjoy the other ones, but it's just, it's not nearly as wacky as Fearless Hyena or full of the prolonged battles we get with the Young Master. It just found that tonal balance that I first enjoyed when discovering his work, and it finds him moving away from the kung fu genre and caring a little bit less about the martial arts, and not to mention just including Sammo Hung in this film. He plays Jackie Chan plays Dragon again, a lieutenant in the 19th century Hong Kong Marines. And
well, it's the Marine Police Force.
Yes.
It's the crazy. Yeah, it's like it's an interesting. It's something I wish I knew more about the history, because there's clearly a rich, the kind of historical thing going on in the background that I'm not getting all of.
Yeah. Actually, I mean, this is much, much later. It's, you know, a 2011 film, but one of the last films that Jackie worked as some kind of director on was a film called 1911, about the 1911 revolution. And it's not a great movie, but seeing that and then thinking about this and Project A Part 2 being set very close to that, just before, makes me want to dig into some history books and, you know, really try and find out more about this sort of time, and off the back of 1911, you know, Sun Yat-sen and things like that. So, but the main thing I think to talk about with Project A is just the stylistic maturation in his directing, you know?
For sure. Yeah.
And before we get on to that, I just want to talk about editing a little bit, because it's worth mentioning that I think every single film we're discussing post Fearless Hyena was edited by one Peter Chung, who, if you'll permit me the digression,
no, not at all,
has maybe the single greatest filmography of any technician I can think of.
Ooh.
He started in 1972, and his second film was Fist of Fury. After that, name a classic Hong Kong martial arts or action film between 1972 and 1998, and there's a good chance that he cut it. So, to name just a handful: One-Armed Boxer, The Skyhawk, Hand of Death, Iron-Fisted Monk, The Prodigal Son, Long Arm of the Law, Heroes Shed No Tears, Yes Madam, Rouge, which is a drama but incredible, Lady Reporter, The Story of Ricky, and The Legend of Fong Sai-yuk. And that's just a handful. It is insane how many great films he worked on.
All the earlier Jackie Chan movies, but I think it's the first time where you feel like he has watched Hollywood movies and kind of gotten what makes Hollywood camera work feel grand, especially in that era.
Yeah. The camera's moving a lot, and also it just... Yeah, it feels, again, like graceful cinematography, and certainly just allowing scenes to breathe. And, you know, you're right, thinking about the editing. It's something that I guess I don't always focus on, because you're so focused on the action and just what he's doing in terms of stunts. It's just, it's every bit as graceful. And it's like one of those things where I'm like, oh, I would love to just see how they cut all this together. You know, it's just
I'll come back to that, but the action is driven by their editing choices, really. But talking about camera, you were saying, it's got this sort of classic Hollywood feel. Now, I think you're right. But more than that, I think the camera is just so purposeful in this and all of his best films. So, for instance, like you said, he's part of the Hong Kong Marine Police, and there's a scene early-ish, where they go to a private club to attempt to arrest a gangster. And when he walks in, the camera takes in the whole space. Yeah. We get the lay of the land. There are two staircases on either side leading up to a landing area where there are big doors in the center to an office where his target is. And just off that landing above his head is a massive chandelier. So before anything happens, we've got the geography of the scene mapped out. So now whenever he cuts to something, we understand the spatial relationships. So when he throws somebody down the stairs or swings on the chandelier, everything tracks. And I know this sounds simple, but it is stunning to me how many filmmakers, and especially Hollywood filmmakers, and especially in the last 2 decades, do not do this.
No.
Yeah, you have no sense of place in a lot of... I think that a lot of, and like you said, the last 2 decades, I think a lot of filmmakers assume that CG is somehow going to plug that in for them, when it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
and there's plenty of good action in CG. Yeah. You can have big CG thing and it still be good action because you've set it up right. So I don't blame CG necessarily.
I think it's more of a problem of editing.
Yeah.
CG.
When I think of Michael Bay, especially,
Michael Bay's a good example because he had a very specific style that only he could do, and he could sort of pull it off. There's a certain amount of not caring about geography in his films, but anytime anyone else tries to do it, it just becomes soup, and you can't see anything. And exactly. Chan is setting off Chekhov's chair and Chekhov's chandelier and Chekhov's every bar and everything. And it's even something that some of the more celebrated modern martial arts movies, I think, took a while. I think the first Raid suffers from this a little bit, and I think people talk about the Raid as like this perfect modern martial arts movie, and I think it's very good. But I think that its sequel and some of the other Indonesian movies that have come out have figured out to set their stage a little better in the years since. I think that it's not just the hand-to-hand part; it's the environment too.
I think the Raid sequel has better action, but is about a year too long. Yeah,
I agree. I'll totally agree. But like the action, I mean, just taking time with the action in that movie, really. Though the one that always comes to mind is Before the Night. What is it? Oh, shit.
The Night Comes for Us.
The Night Comes for Us is the one where I think that everything came together for that sort of group of filmmakers, where it's just pure action, but you understand everything that's happening.
I will come back to Michael Bay with a specific example fairly soon.
I'm pretty sure I know what you're going to say too, but
I know you do. In our next film.
I know exactly where you're going to go with this.
But no, the film for me is like the catalyst for the destruction of Hollywood action, The Bourne Supremacy.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Bourne Supremacy is visual salad that you can't see any of the action. Bourne Identity's okay in that respect. It's still not
a different
great.
director.
Paul Greengrass is very different.
And I think that the first time people saw it, it seemed really interesting. Like it seemed something new, this sort of chaotic thing. But it just doesn't.
Shaky cam. It just
there's that. The best example for me is that I think it's Taken 2 or Taken 3 that has that famous shot where he goes over a chain link fence and there's something like 15 cuts because poor elderly what's his name Liam Neeson can't just jump over that, and they don't want to use a stunt double for some reason, so they have to cut the shit out of it. And all the camera angles are different for some reason.
So there's a very good series on YouTube called Every Frame a Painting.
Yes.
Where there's a very good episode. It's about 10 minutes long about how Jackie edits.
I'm pretty sure I've seen this.
And there's a point at which he's talking about how he and Peter Chung accentuate the power of punches and kicks in their movies by when they go from a wide shot into a close-up, they cut back a few frames to show the wind-up a second time in close-up before the hit lands. And the point of that is it gives us time to adjust to the new shot before the blow lands. And showing us the wind-up again makes it feel more powerful. And one of the things that they show in Every Frame a Painting is the contrast between that and modern Hollywood action, which often cuts without ever showing the hit land. So if you look at like an MCU film, for instance, the impact often actually happens between cuts. So we only see the wind up and the reaction. And it just looks weak. It doesn't look like anything's happening.
And
you want to go off on a tangent. I'll do a quick one that Jim can cut if he wants. But that was actually, I think that is inadvertently the result of rules and regulations on children's entertainment because cartoons weren't allowed to show impacts. And I have this theory that all of these filmmakers around my age, maybe Jim's age, a little bit older than me, all watched these cartoons where you never see the actual impact, and it just sort of became their visual language. This is a conspiracy theory. It probably has no basis in reality, but it's always something I've connected.
I'm the same age. I can see it.
I grew up watching Tom and Jerry, and I always felt like, God, these are violent. And obviously, that's what
they didn't have. It was for stuff like Batman the Animated Series. And I only learned that from watching the commentaries on the DVD. But they're pointing out, you notice how you never see Batman actually punch someone. he winds up and there'll be like a flash, and then he'll be on the guy will be on the ground.
Right.
But that thing is very different in like graphical.
It looks, if you're because animation is planning out. Animation is all storyboarded, and it's got the
point.
right angles and stuff. Whereas if you're just shooting two actors swinging at each other in a green screen, you're not really planning it. Yeah, it's about planning. It just comes down to planning, I think.
Well, one thing we need to mention in regards to Project Day is taking a deep breath and going, ouch. Because I mean, yes, we could talk about how amazing a lot of the action set pieces are, but the things he did in terms of death-defying stunts, and obviously we can point to the Harold Lloyd homage involving the clock tower, not once but 3 times if you include the outtakes.
Yeah.
I just jumped out of my seat. Yeah.
It's a double homage because it's also a homage to a shot in Buster Keaton's Three Ages.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Because there's a bit where he's trying to jump to a roof in Three Ages, and he was meant to make that jump, but he didn't. And so they added the bit where Keaton falls down through 3 awnings.
Right.
I don't think I knew that backstory, but I know
didn't either. But yeah.
Wow. But yeah, it's beautiful. The love of silent comedy is fully embraced in his work here for the first time. Fearless Hyena and Half a Life of Kung Fu kind of play up the clownish side. But yeah, you're right. He's not channeling Bruce Lee here, but it's Harold Lloyd, Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, and when Yuen Biao and Sammo are with him, it's the Three Stooges.
Yeah, or Marx Brothers. Yeah, a little bit of that. Yeah,
and that's actually something I think about the other 2 movies that I didn't mention is that I don't think he's as good as a clown, and I don't think the clown part fits. I think that part of being a Buster Keaton fan is that the guy who is just trying his best and is in the wrong places at the wrong time, that really is the Jackie Chan I think of when I just think of my favorite movies of his. Like, he's a little full of himself in some of the police story movies and stuff, but he still has this sort of like underdog quality to him that the clown version of him doesn't have.
Yeah.
Even if you're talking about the police story films and you're saying he's a little full of himself in those, I think that's more a feature of the Honor of God movies myself.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Which I don't love as much. But he still gets the shit kicked out of him in all of those movies. Like by the end, he is just worn down, bloodied, and that happens in all of his films. There's none of this Rock and Jason Statham and Vin Diesel posturing where nobody's allowed to lose a fight.
Right, that ridiculous garbage. Yeah. I think that someone would sit them down and say, look at Jackie Chan's career.
Yeah, don't take it so seriously. God. Yeah. I mean, that turns me off to some degree. I mean, there's something about Jackie Chan, even when he's, playing a cop or whatever, there's still a wink and a smile, but it's not like, it's kind of funny how we're talking about, he's probably not the best at being the clown. It's a weird comparison that popped up in my mind, but I always kind of go back to when I realized, where there's a jump the shark moment in the Naked Gun films where Leslie Nielsen starts reacting with a goofy face to the things that are happening to him. That really turns me off, because the best thing about him, especially when you think of him in Airplane, is that he doesn't get goofy or react. He's taking it seriously, and that's kind of the joy of that, is that, there's the lack of self-awareness of oh, that was weird or that was goofy, and I think I just like that more. Man. Yeah, straight man, exactly. Yeah.
Chan makes as in those movies those comedies he did with Hung, he's almost always the straight man in a certain way. He just sort of does cameos in a lot of them, but he's a straight man in those usually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that is, I think that's one of his strengths.
But yeah, Project A is just so entertaining. I love the bar fight at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, for sure.
The guy getting ever larger plates of spaghetti in the face.
Yeah, the good, really quality slapstick. Not the really bad Hong Kong comedy where it's just guys looking at women in bras and looking at the camera and crossing their eyes and making
Oh,
faces.
you've seen some Wong Jing films.
Yeah. I mean, and as someone who watches a lot of Italian exploitation movies, that is most Italian comedies for several decades, and they're kind of unwatchable to me. It's the same thing that Jim was talking about with a lot of those American spoof movies don't work for me because they're too self-aware, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work for the comedy, and in this case, it's slapstick at its own, and Hung is really funny in this movie.
Absolutely.
Too,
yeah.
He's good at characters. He just does good characters. These days he usually plays scary older guys. I've been noticing, I guess, because he still has it and he is an older guy, so I suppose that works. But he was good at characters.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was saying a couple of days ago when I was talking on Blue Sky to some people about Jackie Chan, was I'd really be interested to see now what he could do with a villain.
Yeah, he's never... I mean, he's done a couple, but I don't know.
Not really.
You know what I just found out, because I had to review the 4K, is that Stallone wanted him for Demolition Man. And that would have been terrible casting.
Wow.
Wesley Snipes is the whole reason that movie works, and Chan, English as a second language, he wouldn't be comfortable. He would have been like, I could see him as the Stallone character, maybe. Sure. But that would have been very bad casting. I'd
love to see him fight Stallone.
Yeah, I would too. I'd even more love to see him fight top of his prime Wesley Snipes, because I was shocked at how good Snipes is. I thought Snipes learned all his martial arts for Blade, but he's still doing some pretty good high kicks and stuff in Demolition Man that I had forgotten about.
Yeah, he has now. Jackie has now fought Arnold on screen in a terrible film called The Iron Mask. And I watched that and I was just like, God, if only this had happened 30 years ago,
Yeah.
But yeah, to get back to Project A, the thing that's really interesting to me about it is, like, the villain, which is a pirate played by Dick Way, takes a long time to appear. I think we're about an hour in before we even see him, or he's even established really as the villain. But he's a real threat, and Dick Way literally twirling his moustache in his performance is just great fun. I love his costuming and the tattoos they've given him for it. It just looks fantastic, and his sort of cave lair is amazing. And they blow him up with a grenade, wrap him in a carpet and blow him up with a grenade.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember, is this the one... I watched both Project A and Project A2 in a row, and so they kind of blurred together a little bit. This one is the one with Lee Hoi Sang.
Yeah. The clock tower fight before the fall.
Yeah.
And at watching all these Shaw Brothers movies for review, he's become one of my favorite character actors. And he's actually really amusing in Young Master. He has like this mohawk mullet braid thing going on. And then, he starts to show up in a lot of these movies. And then unfortunately I looked him up and he died in September. And then I found out Lily Lee died in October.
Yeah, I heard about that. And as I said, we lost Cheng Pei Pei this year as well.
Cheng Pei Pei. And then we found out that we lost Corey Yuen.
Yeah.
But he had actually died of COVID years before. And we just
a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it was all at once. And I think Jimmy Wang Yu also just died.
Yeah, I mean, but that's, that's how old this generation is.
It's true. That's a good. I mean, I just have to assume that Sammo Hung will live forever.
Well, we can only hope.
Yeah, and I'm starting to think Jackie is indestructible. So
Yeah, he has to be unbreakable. Yeah, right. Like he's going to keep going forever.
Armor of God might tell you something different about that, but. And this is maybe a good time to talk about the Jackie Chan stunt team a little and his sort of stock company, because both he and Sammo had the actors that they would come back to and back to and back to. I think the most notable in this one, and we'll get to him a bit more in the next, is the great Mars.
Yes.
Who, has a really good presence in Dragon Lord as well. But Mars tends to be like his sort of second in command comic foil in a lot of these the movies of this period, and he's got an incredibly distinctive face. It's a shame he only made one film as a leading man called Lackey and the Lady Tiger. I've only seen a dub of it, and that's not really fair to judge it on, I feel. So I'd really like to see somebody clean that up, but I think that's probably a long way off.
Down on the list.
Yeah, because I mean, there's not too many people who are like clamoring for Mars' one and only starring role, I think.
There's a couple good interviews with him over the last couple 88 films releases. I think maybe it was Arrow. They're all blurring together. Them and Eureka, they all have U.S. releases now. But they had some old like 2000s interviews with him. So.
Yeah, and he's always got some great stories as well. Yeah, he's. I'm a big fan of his, and he crops up in a lot of these, and is always a lot of fun to watch. Should we move on to?
I was going to just ask: is Bill Tung in this? No, he's in the sequel, right? He's in.
Yeah,
because Project A2. Actually, I think I enjoyed just a tad more.
Okay.
Myself, but I can see why it's not as good of a movie. But there was just there's this sort of thing, like there's this undercurrent of there's a political message here that I'm missing. And in the first movie, it seems very patriotic for Hong Kong and England, and like it's covering colonization from an interesting point of view. And then by the next one, it seems that they've turned on that idea a little bit. And I assume. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I definitely prefer the first film, but you're right. There are some really interesting political implications, and I don't really want to get into Jackie's politics.
Jackie's politics aren't great. We can just say that. They're not great, and they've gotten worse over the years. I think is the best way to put it.
They definitely suck, but I think the only film where they come in really heavy is Chinese Zodiac, which we're not going to go into particularly much because it's a piece of crap.
Well, I mean, one of my favorite modern wuxia movies is Hero, which a lot of people think is just government propaganda. So it's hard to say, but I think a lot of the filmmaking, I think the thing that makes all these movies from this era, the new wave era, interesting politically, is everybody was kind of on the same page, no matter what side of the aisle they were on, because of the upcoming 97 changeover from England to China. And I think that was just on everybody's mind, no matter what they thought politically.
And there are definitely some fascinating films, not really Jackie's, but made in like 95, 96.
Yeah. It's just like there's a subtext there that once you know about it is pretty cool and interesting.
But I think I don't want to talk about the politics because I don't know enough about Chinese politics.
I'm coming at it from, I find it interesting because now I know there are politics there, but I don't really understand them. It's just, I like the idea of, especially genre cinema, having a political persona, even if it's something I don't understand or don't agree with. I just find that to be an interesting flavor to the whole thing going on. Again, it's why I like a lot of Italian, spaghetti westerns are full of like communist filmmakers sliding their shit in there, and then if you don't know the context of it, you're going to miss it. But I just find it interesting, and I don't really get what's going on here, but I did really like the changeover from Project A to Project A2 and how different it felt like the message was.
The thing that I really love in Project A2 though is the farce sequence, which he said was based largely on Marx Brothers and took him a month to shoot.
Oh, wow.
When there are like 5 different sets of people all hiding in Maggie Cheung's apartment.
Yeah.
And
which they kind of do again in Miracles, actually. I think it's a little bit better in Project A2, though.
Jackie is not always great at farce. Again, see Armor of God. but I think he does it really well in that one, in Project A Part 2, and I think a lot of it is powered by how good Maggie Cheung is.
Speaking of Maggie Cheung.
Indeed. I mean, I'm just going to say it up front. I'm a huge Maggie Cheung fan.
As well you
and
should be.
He doesn't always use her bbrilliantly, particularly in the film we're about to get to.
Yeah.
Well, not so much brilliantly as sympathetically.
Yeah.
But I'm just enchanted by Maggie Cheung in absolutely everything. So, But Police Story.
Oh, Police Story. Good Lord.
So, how to set this up?
I'm going to set this up by saying I miss shopping malls.
At first, he was hailed as a hero.
Lock him in the cells.
Yes, sir.
Book him. For murder.
Until he got set up.
Get in!
Now his whole police precinct is after him. To clear his name, his only chance is to get the crooks who framed him. Jackie Chan is a one-man battalion. As he sets his record straight in Police Story.
I was like, I'm a weirdo in that, like, I liked walking around and just, like stopping by the food court and getting all your Christmas shopping done in one spot. And they don't exist anymore.
Jim, you can stay with us. The Mall of America is 15 minutes away.
Of course. Yes. I
So just
am
let you
meaning to
walk
do that.
around. Yeah, we'll let you walk. We'll put you on some of the rides.
Yay! Maybe
So I feel like
I can reenact some Police Story
There you go.
sequences.
Don't, but there you go.
So I feel like it's pretty much inarguable that Enter the Dragon is the most important martial arts film of the 70s.
Yeah,
Correct.
Certainly, in terms of how they were exported. I think it's equally inarguable that Police Story is the most important of the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, especially if you're not considering John Woo's movies martial arts films, which I personally don't. Well, the ones that, he did martial arts films.
Those movies are.
Right.
Yeah. And I know some people try to kind of cram the gunplay stuff in there, but those are something different. And I think that those also had a big part in the way that people learned to appreciate Hong Kong films in the 90s outside of Hong Kong. But
Sure.
for martial arts.
He made a couple of great martial arts films,
Yeah.
though, particularly Jackie isn't in it, but Lost Hurrah for Chivalry is incredible.
That's a good.
Yeah.
I think that's also on Criterion, actually.
Eureka over here. But Police Story has its roots in Jackie's unhappiness with a film called The Protector, which was his second attempt in 1985 to crack America. And I think it's notable that he didn't try again in a US production, at least for 13 years.
Mm-hmm. I see The Protector pretty high. I was looking at Jim sent me your Jackie Chan ranked list, and that was the only one that caught my eye because I thought that was a particularly awful movie, personally.
I am about to explain this.
Okay, cool.
So Jackie and James Glickenhaus, who directed it, did not get along. Jackie was unhappy with the swearing, which he also asked to be cut from the original screenplay of Rush Hour, by the way. Gratuitous nudity by the women working in the bad guy's drug lab, and the sort of general harder edge to the US cut, which kind of tries to cast him as more of a Dirty Harry type, as well as the limited action.
And that's Glickenhaus's thing. He did The Exterminator and The Shakedown.
Yeah.
And that's his thing, is borderline exploitation films, basically.
So the film that The Protector is in the US is not the same as the film it is in Hong Kong.
Okay.
Because when Jackie got home, he shot a lot of additional footage. He excised every single frame of the nudity. along with a lot else. He added a subplot featuring Sally Ye, who would later be the blind woman protected by Chow Yun-fat in John Woo's The Killer.
Oh, yeah.
And he shot a lot of additional action. He added 2 extra fights in the new storyline, and he extended and made more complex every single existing action scene in the film. It is not suddenly a masterpiece, but it is a massive improvement. It's a much more entertaining, much more exciting film. Danny Aiello isn't in it very much, so the sort of buddy aspect goes kind of out of the window. But, you know, the action is great, what he adds, and it's actually pretty shockingly well cut together. Again, Peter Chung worked on the edit for the Hong Kong version. And it's not entirely seamless. There's a slight difference in the stock, particularly towards the end of the film, when he's added a lot to the fight with Bill Superfoot Wallace. But it's really a much better movie. So yeah, but Jackie still thought he could do better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to. The version we got on Blu-ray here was definitely the American version, because it was there wasn't even the option for a non-English dub.
Yeah, sadly, the 88 Films disc has both versions on it, but sadly the Hong Kong cut is upgraded from an SD source, so it doesn't look as good. It looks fine.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's definitely a bit rougher around the edges, but I'm never going to watch the original cut again.
Yeah, the idea of like trying to rebrand him as like Clint Eastwood, as I'm reading here, I'm like, what? No, don't do that to Jackie.
It doesn't work.
No, I wouldn't think so.
But as I say, it's a much better movie in his Hong Kong cut.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to seek that out.
But for me, I think Police Story is probably his masterpiece.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, everything he did in Project A is evolved and turned up to 11. The plot is a bit looser than some of them. It has Jackie as Kakui, a cop who's protecting a witness, played by his real-life sister-in-law, Brigitte Lam Chi Ha. He met Joan Lin, his wife, while he was making Project A, and while he was dating her and was making Project A, he actually took a break, took his entire stunt crew over to the film that she was making in Taiwan, because she had like one scene where she had to do a little bit of action, and he took over the set for a couple of days just as a favor to her.
Yeah.
To work on that one sequence. I think that was the point, apparently, at which Sammo said to him, and you do this for someone you're not dating? But yeah, by the time that they were making Project A, Brigitte was his sister-in-law, which makes it very funny when he puts her through quite a lot of pain in the last sequence.
Yeah, I know. I felt for her, and I felt for all the pane glass, all the shattered glass in this movie. Oh my God.
The stunt team referred to it as Glass Story.
Yes, rightfully so. My goodness. Yeah.
So the action starts almost immediately with a series of sequences that would be the climax of any US film worth its salt.
Yeah, that's exactly my complaint. The only complaint I have on this movie is that it starts so high.
Yeah.
That it takes so much to get back up to that level. That final sequence goes on long enough that I think it lives up to it. But man, does that opening sequence, like, it sets you on such a high that you just want more of it. It's like it gets you hooked.
It definitely steals a lot of thunder, but it is also most of the first like half hour of the movie.
Right.
So you know, you're a bit like need a break.
Could use a reprieve. Yeah.
But, you know, as I say, that would be the climax of any US film, and any one of those like 3 sequences would be the climax of a US film.
And it is nearly the climax of a US film.
It is, because Bad Boys 2.
Oh, Bad Boys 2.
It's so
Bad
funny.
Boys
First
2
time I
on
saw that
so many
movie, I'm like, isn't this just the ending? This is the beginning. Yeah.
I had only recently seen Police Story when I went to see Bad Boys 2 at the cinema. And I was just stunned by exactly how shameless it was.
Yeah.
It is almost shot for shot the same as the opening sequence of, the cars running through the settlement built on the side of the hill in Police Story. Except that all it manages to do is demonstrate every single thing I just said about Jackie's editing versus Hollywood editing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also kind of a mean-spirited sequence because those are like
That was a
Americans
mean-spirited
driving
movie
through.
in general.
Yeah, Americans just crashing through innocent. I think it's Cuba. I can't remember. Yeah, just crashing and destroying their livelihood while cheering. Whereas at least in Jackie Chan's movie, it's like they're trying to prevent this from happening, and it's the bad guys that are causing it.
But I'm just stunned how much worse it looks in Bad Boys 2.
Yeah.
Because I think you see Jackie in the car maybe twice in that whole Police Story sequence, and everything else is, whether it's a sort of medium or a wide, from outside and just watching things happen and the mayhem unfurl. And, a lot of stunt people getting hurt, as it turned out.
Yeah, you can tell.
Yeah, no shit.
There's some shots where you're like, oh, crap. Is that guy dead?
I mean, it's just incredible, and this is the other thing you just can't do anymore. And it's good that there are so many more safety measures. Don't get me wrong, but the fact that there are so many more safety measures, and that now you can do a lot of this with CGI, a lot of people are, and it's just not the same. I don't want anybody to get hurt or to die for my movies. I really don't.
Well, I mean,
by the same token, my God, it looks so much better.
Yeah, but the thing is that you can just tell that those movies exist. You just got to go rent them. They're just not new movies, and that's really cool that we have this period, and we don't have to feel guilty about it because it's already gone and it already happened.
Yeah. And most of them were fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, even Tom Cruise
about actual death.
Tom Cruise in the Mission Impossible movies, I don't think he's going to dislocate his pelvis or break it.
No, he likes to play up, but yeah, those are pretty well practiced.
Oh yeah.
They're cool, but
I mean, that foot injury was, not good. So on the sixth one, I've got limited time for particularly the last one. I thought was terrible, but I've always got a little respect for somebody who's actually doing their stunts, visibly doing their stunts, And I do think another thing that we've lost is the art of hiding a stunt double. I've seen some really bad doubling in recent Hollywood stuff.
At the same time, boy, sometimes when Jackie Chan's fighting a woman, she suddenly has very, very broad shoulders in one shot, and then the next shot.
I keep going to it when you mention things that don't work as well, but Armor of God.
But it is very funny watching those. Almost all these movies I just happen to have watched in the last year, and pointing out to my partner, you see that's a man now. It's a different actor, and she didn't notice until I pointed out. And then she noticed it in every shot. But it's kind of like it goes over your head. If you're just into the action, you don't really care at the time. Yeah. But you watch the movie 13 times, then it starts to get kind of over the top. But anyway, go on. Sorry.
There are also some nice moments in some of the films, particularly this happens with Yin Biao, I think, where he's fighting himself from time to time. Because he's doubling for so many other people. Yeah. Because he was so good at like the acrobatics side of things that he ended up doubling for loads of people. So I think the end of Prodigal Son, there's a couple of moments where he's essentially fighting himself.
Yeah. I think the guilty pleasure for me in Police Story is certainly like the home invasion burglar set piece where it was just like, okay, the opening is incredible. The closing is incredible. This is just silly, but I'm still laughing because it's like almost implementing Weekend at Bernie's at one point to like pretend someone is conscious when they really aren't.
And that's a wonderful showcase for Mars as well, who is playing that role. Faking attacking Brigitte Lin. I love his performance in this, and actually in Police Story 2. I think he and Maggie Cheung both have better roles in Police Story 2, which isn't as good a film overall for me, though it's improved by the shorter Hong Kong cut rather than the extended cut that got released on the 4K. But it doesn't exactly treat Maggie much better, but it gives her more to do, and she's really funny in one particular sequence of that. I do like the sort of farcical sequence here as well, where she overhears him complaining about her to Brigitte Lin.
Oh, right.
The sexual politics are very dated, but that's 1980.
Yeah, it's a little misogynistic, but again, if you've seen any of the Lucky Stars movies, it really doesn't feel misogynistic at all.
But yeah, I mean, also it's just 1985. That's
I kind of expect that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So we can be critical of it all we like, but it is there. It is what it is, and like I've said before, I find it difficult applying like modern morality to films that are 40 years old. I think that's not entirely fair.
No,
right.
Some of the time you're like, ugh.
I think my rule is acknowledgement is a fine thing, but acknowledgement is.
I think 16 Candles came out in 1985, if I'm not mistaken.
I own copies of Cannibal Ferox and Cannibal Holocaust, so I just feel like I have to bite my tongue because I'll be a hypocrite if I complain too much about.
I just got the Gyra Guts trilogy box set. So Anyway, I think this is the best action of his career. The tenement thing is fantastic, but then that going straight into the scene of him hanging off the bus.
Yeah.
Oh,
and that he's just doing that. Yeah, the umbrella is steel, but he's still just doing that.
The sort of variation that Michelle Yeoh does on it in the third movie is the one that feels like just the most dangerous thing that you could possibly do to someone. But in part because she's not Jackie Chan, you feel like he can take that fall, unlike most human beings.
She also does a variation on it in Yes, Madam as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. She does.
Very hairy.
Yeah.
And then the mall sequence.
Oh my god. That's everything I want right there. I seriously get I get goosebumps throughout that. I mean, again, like we mentioned Buster Keaton a lot, and certainly I just can't imagine some of the things that he puts himself throughout that entire sequence. But it really is just like signature Jackie Chan done right, and the balance between the action and the comedy and just the stunts, and it just culminates in one of the best sequences in probably his entire filmography. So I just think this is what people need to go to if they're new to Jackie Chan, just to get a sense of like what he's capable of.
It's interesting. If I were going to recommend just one sequence, it would probably be the playground fight in Police Story 2, which is one of the most insane, incredible fight sequences I've ever seen. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I saw that a long time ago. I didn't get to go back to it for this episode, but I remember that standing out, obviously, yeah.
But Police Story 2 is not as good a film.
Right.
And this is, easily the best climax of any of his films, I think. It's just incredible. And there are little things that I love in it, too. Like you've got the pole and slide that we'll talk about in a sec, but like, there's a moment just before the fight he has with Fung Ha-kun where he kicks a guy and he falls between two escalators and slides down.
I think it's not just that it's a shopping mall and a place that people are familiar with, but I think that like a lot of us have intrusive thoughts about certain things when we're in a big area like that, and I think falling between the escalator and the thing the sliding down the pole thing are both intrusive thoughts that we have as children.
Yes, exactly.
So Chan shows us like, oh, here, we'll just do it for you. Now you don't have to hurt yourself.
But that jump to get to the pole and then the slide down the pole is just, I mean, it's so crazy. It's and of course he shows it to us 3 times. I don't think he did it 3 times. It's just different angles.
Yeah.
With Project A, he did that 3 times.
Right.
You know, because you can tell because it's, you know, he falls differently each time. But that slide down the pole, and it's, you know, lit by light bulbs all the way down, stripped all the skin off his hands. And I think he dislocated several bones. So when he's walking away at the end, that's all very genuine. He is extremely hurt. You know, the catalogue of injuries that he's had, I think he said once he's dislocated almost every bone in his body. I think, like, except for the bones in his ear, he's probably dislocated or broken pretty much every bone in his body.
Unbelievable.
At this point. Which is
what he does for his art. Give it up for that alone.
No, absolutely. I mean, like he I think you were talking about Rumble in the Bronx, and that's the film he broke his foot on, and then continued while wearing a cast and a sock that was painted to look like a trainer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he damn near broke his neck in Project A, but he still said his lines afterwards. And I just
the footage of him being carted away on Project A is pretty bad.
Yeah.
I mean, the worst one, of course, is and we should maybe touch on it here because it's between these 2 films, Police Story and Miracles. You know, the worst one is Armor of God.
The first, yeah.
Yeah. Not a great movie, but some amazing action. But it, you know, you can very much see the joins with that movie because in the first sequence you see him with very short hair and you know, doing all of his stunts, and the rest of the movie he's got much longer hair, and that is there to cover the literal hole in his head.
There was actually on it might have been the Jonathan Ross show, but I remember it being on MTV, a special about him when I was in high school. And they had a whole montage of all that footage. And they showed pretty graphic shot of how bad his head injury was on that. And I always remember that.
Yeah, it's in the no goods on Armor of God, and, you know, blood coming out of his ear and everything. And he got, you know, bone in his brain and nearly died.
And it wasn't even a super spectacular stunt. It's like it was a high fall, but it wasn't like a crazy stunt. It's like when you find out that that the crocodile hunter died from just a freak accident and not you know, one of the scary things he did during his career.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's just jumping from a wall to a tree, and on one attempt he missed it, and just one of those freak things after all the insane shit he did.
Yeah.
But yeah, terrible accident. As I say, interesting movie. I think, you know, the finale fight is really, really good. I actually like the female co-star he's got in it. Not Rosamund Kwan. Who am I thinking of?
You know, it's been so long since I saw the first one.
So I'm just going to pull it up.
Might as well.
Obviously, cut this, but give me a second. Lola Fauna, yeah. I like his co-star Lola Fauna in that. You know, it's basically a sort of mix between Indiana Jones and James Bond in a lot of ways, in terms of, you know, he's always got the girls hanging off him in the Armor of God series, and it's her and Rosamund Kwan in the first film. I think they're both actually having a lot of fun and are quite fun in it. I think this is the one where the farce really doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. But let's get to Miracles, because this is the one that I struggled with. Maybe I just, again, pacing issues, but I guess I just admire his ambition to try something different at the very least. Like if you want some old timey cars and Jackie in a fedora, sure, let's go for it. Let's see what he could do to make like a little gangster picture.
I'm interested. Which version did you watch?
Did you watch it on Criterion or HBO, Jim?
I watched it on HBO. Yes,
and
Max.
it's the long cut, because that's the one I watched too.
Yeah,
the Criterion has the longer cut, and it is too long.
Yes,
I watched the longer cut, and I really like it. It's Mr. Canton and Lady Rose in that cut, and it's him and Anita Mui, and yeah, I really like this. I would argue that this isn't the best film he directed, but it is perhaps his best directed film.
Sure, I can see that. Yeah.
It's got some Spielbergish-ness to it. The thing that I kept on thinking of at the first half is, did he see The Untouchables? Because there was things that kept on reminding me of The Untouchables, and I could see that being a movie he liked.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then I started to wonder, or did he see Dick Tracy? And then I said, Dick Tracy came out a year later. And then I started noticing all these weird things it had in common with Dick Tracy. And then I started to wonder if what's his name had seen this instead.
There's definitely some Spielberg to it, but specifically there's Capra.
Oh yeah. It's an adaptation of a Capra,
of two Capra movies, right?
Two of them.
Capra
right.
version. Yeah, he did both.
Pocket
the first
Miracles.
One, yeah, and Lady for a Day was the original title.
Have you guys seen either of those? Because I haven't.
I haven't.
Nope.
I want to see some older Capra for sure, because I just know the big ones.
If I would have not been doing my own podcast prep this month, and it being Christmas, I probably would have tried to watch both of them, if I was honest, just to know the difference.
I have a friend who I often have round or go to his for a weekend, and we just watch movies. And sometimes there are themes and things weave in and out of the weekends. And he's been really getting into martial arts movies. I've been sort of working on him on that for a while. And he's getting a bit more into Jackie, but Shaw Brothers has been more his thing. But he's a classic cinema guy, and we have talked about the idea of over a weekend, which tends to be like 3 days, doing Lady for a Day, Pocket Full of Miracles, and Miracles across the 3 days. So I really like that idea. So that's kind of why I didn't try to do the two Capras for this, because I'm sort of saving it to watch them with my friend Tim.
I recently caught up with a pre-code Capra called American Madness, I believe, that really took me aback. I was kind of in awe of that movie, and a lot of that has to do with Walter Houston, who is just he's incredible in that film. So it's gotten me really excited to kind of go back, because obviously I started with, like most people, It's a Wonderful Life, and then I saw Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It happened one night, but there's a whole slew before any of those big ones, and one of them I highly recommend is American Madness, because it's insane.
I will definitely check that out, because I love everything I've seen of Capra.
Yeah, he's someone I'm probably going to cover, if not next year, definitely the year after, because
I think the whole cornball image is very undeserved.
I agree. Yeah,
progressive. Yeah, but the reason I wish I might have seen the Capra movies is because I am curious as to their structure, because one of the stranger and more endearing but also weird things about this movie is that it really starts as a sort of, the idea being that Jackie Chan is a down on his luck guy who stumbles into becoming a mob boss.
Right.
But that's only like half the movie, or maybe even only a third of the movie. The other bit, the majority of the movie, is this sort of La Caja Falls meets Father of the Bride with gangsters thing going on. And I was not expecting any of that. And so I'm wondering if that's how the originals are structured too, or if they lean into one aspect more than the other.
I mean, I'm curious how the kung fu is in the Capra films.
Yeah. It's probably all right.
No, there's so much he should be proud of, in just terms of branching out. Like like we're talking about, it's very well directed. There's
His performance is better here too.
Yeah.
I do think
he's playing into his strengths, so he's figured it out. He's figured it out at this point.
And there's even a musical number, so it's just like kind of cool.
Well, no. Oh, so Jim, that's. I feel like I'm interrupting, but I just got to get this off. So Anita Mui she was referred to as the Madonna of the East. She was a massive, huge pop star that like performed at the Seoul Olympics and was like changed the face of Hong Kong pop music with her costumes and dancing and stuff, and then became an actress. And I was just kind of thinking of the parallels to Madonna,
Dick Tracy,
yeah. But specifically in the movie Dick Tracy, maybe the best scene in the whole movie is a Madonna musical number that is them practicing set to footage of mob violence.
Right.
And it's juxtaposed, and the exact same thing happens in this film.
Weird. You're right. Huh.
It's very, very specific, and it is something that you've had juxtapositions in Godfather, so like that's already there. But it's so specific that it really struck me, and I think because I knew how famous she was, and I knew she died young, and I knew she died of cancer. She had cervical cancer. She died young, and I remember when she died, it was like social media was enough of a thing that it was just all of social media that was movie social media was upset about it. But what I didn't know is that she had a singer sister, older sister, who also died of cervical cancer when she was 40.
Oh wow!
And it's just that just really, I mean, to bring everything down here, that just really, really depressed me to think that she 2 years after her sister dies, is like, oh, here we are, the exact same thing. But she's like a beloved, like there's a bronze figure of her in Hong Kong that if I ever made to Hong Kong, I'd probably go pose next to. And she's got, there was just, I think 2021, there was a biopic about her that was a big movie in China. So
I'd be curious.
And I think that most people either know her from Rouge, which was just brought up, which is a sort of gothic romance kind of thing that she won awards for. But the other thing people know her for is Heroic Trio and its sequel Executioners, where she's acting alongside Michelle Yeoh and Maggie Cheung. It's kind of like all-star, your three biggest all-star Hong Kong actresses playing superheroes, fighting demons.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, the Heroic Trio films are amazing. Rouge is one of my big discoveries this year, and obviously that was the year before Miracles, and Jackie produced that.
I can't remember which book. Some book I bought about Hong Kong cinema when I was like, I need to figure out what to rent, told me to rent Rouge, and I had a friend who only really liked watching romance movies. So I said, let's go rent this. And they actually had a Hong Kong, there was a store back in Tucson, Arizona that had the Hong Kong disc. So I actually saw Rouge at a much younger age and discovered it at a much younger age than I think a lot of people did, just because it was mentioned in this one book as like movie you have to see to understand this era.
I mean, she's incredible in Rouge.
Yeah, she earns those awards.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And we're going to talk in a minute about another film that she's in, and dear God, the range.
Yeah. She doesn't get too much to do in Miracles, unfortunately. But
though she is lovely in it. I really enjoy her performance. It's very playful and fun. But what impresses me so much about Miracles is just the scale of it and the design of it. I think visually it's so impressive. You mentioned Spielberg, and I definitely think that's there.
There's crane shots. Like there's this
really nice crane, not just crane shots, but like really nice crane shots that set a mood.
Right,
they aren't just being cool about it. Like,
but he's still got that motivated action that we were talking about with Project A, actually there's a very similar sort of shot of a staircase in a scene that turns into a fight scene, I think, in a restaurant, where, you know, a guy gets kicked down the staircase at a certain point, but again, we've established that spiral staircase.
He like hits the
before,
railing or something at one point. It's like, ow, yeah. It's like I think that's the tea house fight, maybe, or yeah.
It's always a tea house or a restaurant.
Yeah.
It's always a tea house. Yep.
And then the factory set piece involving rope. Oh,
the rope factory is amazing.
Yeah,
that one's the most creative.
No kidding.
I mean, that's got to be top 5 most creative fights I've ever seen in any of his movies. It's not necessarily the most intricate, but like just the creativity behind it is fantastic. They must have found that place, that location.
Or maybe something like it, because that definitely seems very built. I don't think you can do a Jackie Chan fight in a location that isn't built for it.
Somebody found out such a thing existed in the ports,
and replicated it or something. Yeah. And then the rickshaw fight. I mean, there's just so much. Yeah, like
that's the funniest blooper of all of them is his rickshaw fight, and he just goes flying off the wrong direction. I know he got hurt, but I was laughing. That was some slapstick, because you know what's supposed to happen, and the rickshaw just goes the wrong direction on the first take.
But what's really fun about it is what's supposed to happen is also slapstick.
Right. It's even funnier slapstick because you've set up a gag, and then none of it happens.
But yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I suspect, as I say, I haven't seen the films. I haven't really read up about them. I suspect it's fairly faithful structurally to, or at least story-wise, to the Capra films, because it definitely has that sort of weird combination of like gangster narrative and screwball narrative that I can imagine from one of his films, of particularly the 30s version. You know, and I think the screwball aspect of it works really nicely. Like Bill Tung is really great as the kind of unscrupulous grandfatherly figure.
I think that this movie, it's Richard. I'm not sure how you pronounce Ng. Him as the really goofy police chief.
Yeah, he's really funny.
And it's really funny because I just had to watch all of the Inspector Wears Skirts movies where he plays like a similar character in a bunch of those. I think it was him. Yeah. And they're just not as funny. And so seeing him be genuinely funny in this kind of role, and I feel like I complain about it being too long, but I think he's the easiest thing to cut out, and I don't want him cut out. So I can't really complain about it being too long otherwise.
He's very funny in Magnificent Warriors as well.
Yes. Yeah. Which is another one I saw for the first time recently.
God, what an incredible movie.
Yeah.
Michelle Yeoh playing Indiana Jones. What's not to love?
Yeah.
Woo.
But yeah, he recently passed away as well, like a couple of years ago, I think. So yeah, as I say, we're just losing all of this generation, really. But yeah, Miracles is a really inventive take on something else that he clearly reveres, I think, you know. And,
for sure, yeah.
It's not something that you might expect. Like the Keaton thing makes sense in a lot of ways, but though there's a certain sentimentality to his films, and that's kind of the caricature of Capra. Capra's not really a touchstone that I might have expected Jackie Chan to have.
Right.
And I think it's a really interesting take on it, and I'm going to be intrigued to see how it stacks up, particularly to the first version, Lady for a Day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm excited to go back and check out the Capra films as well. This was just a case for me, like, gets eagerly anticipating the next action sequence without getting too invested or involved with the plot or the characters. But again, like, just watching it though, aesthetically, and certainly just like we talked about with the cinematography and the costumes, the sets, everything about it was, I mean, like on a technical level, and just him being more ambitious. Yeah, it makes complete sense to me why, you know, this sort of stands out, even if I didn't love it the way I do his other work. Yeah.
I'm also impressed with this quality of the sets, because I've been watching all of these Shaw Brothers movies that all take place on the same 7 sets. And then watching these early Golden Harvest movies, which take place outside, and just getting to see really nice sets. I mean, you get some of that in Project A, where they're taking existing locations and sort of prettying them up, but just having really spectacular sets in this particular movie, which again makes it feel more Hollywood.
I think the costume design as well is great. Like Jackie in his suits and fedora, I think works really well. Like and all of the dresses for Anita Mui as well. She looks incredible in this movie. Not that she doesn't in any other movie you care to name. But I think she's and as I say, I think she's great overall. But yeah, the costume design here I think is a real highlight as well, and just the whole production design and period feel of it works really nicely. And it's not a period that we see terribly often in martial arts films of this era. So there's
really like two periods that so many martial arts movies take place in, and I honestly couldn't tell you. One of them is like late 1800s, early 1900s, and the other one is pretty old. I can never remember. 13th century, maybe. I can't remember, but it's interesting how just a change of venue can be so fresh.
Yeah, and I feel like that's something that also Jackie kind of innovated somewhat with Police Story as well, just bringing it right into modernity and yet still like using guns occasionally, but not really dealing with guns as well. Like as much as I enjoy the John Woo films, my heart is in martial arts cinema rather than gunplay most of the time. I think of it, in the same way that I love dance cinema, and it's like just watching humans do things that you're just like, how the hell are they doing that? Is kind of, and as much fun as like a well staged gunfight can be in a movie, it's not got that same charge to it for me.
Let's briefly get through one that I don't think you're as crazy about, Sam, but at the same time, like, I have not seen the longer cut yet. I have only seen the Miramax version. I mean, I know I saw this in the theater too, when it was just known as Operation Condor, but this is Armor of God 2, Operation Condor. And yeah, like you mentioned earlier with Armor of God, it defines him in full Indiana Jones mode, and I guess I'm here for it. It is very silly.
This used to be my favorite Jackie Chan movie for a long time. It's because it's one I saw in theaters.
Yeah. I get the nostalgic sort of kicks in for me rewatching it.
And so I hadn't watched it in many years, and I imported, because I think it's only in HD from England, and I saw the longer cut for the first time, and I was like, this is better than what I remembered, but maybe it's no longer my favorite Jackie Chan movie.
Sure.
But I still quite like some of the setups.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's too wacky at times, yeah.
All of the action is fantastic. And again, I actually quite like some of the farce. I think the problem with the women, there are three in this movie, and the actresses all do fine, but they're all Willie Scott.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good call.
Yeah.
And that's kind of an issue for me. I need a Marion in there.
Yeah.
It's true. Yep.
And though there are some really fun moments, like a very funny one where one of them's finally got a machine gun trained on the bad guys, and it goes all over when she tries to fire it. That's pretty fun. But as I say, the action is fantastic. Particularly the hotel sequence.
That hotel owner. Oh boy.
I like the windmill,
or
the wind machine.
Oh,
that's great.
Yeah,
the wind turbine. Yeah. Oh,
turbine.
Yeah, that's incredible. But two things I don't like about it. It feels a bit exploitative. There's a whole lot of like not quite nudity, but like pulling off people's towels to distract people, and you're just like,
in a mean-spirited way. I think it's not. It doesn't feel like a fun sexploitation movie. It feels kind of mean.
Like I'm a big exploitation cinema guy. Like, I've done podcasts on, Christina Lindbergh movies with friends of mine. So like, I'm fine with that kind of stuff going on in movies where it belongs, and it doesn't really belong in this movie. And also, it's kind of racist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's too bad because that opening scene is, I think, if it wasn't for how racist it is, it's actually a pretty funny spoof of Indiana Jones to have him stealing stuff and the indigenous culture saying, yeah, go ahead, take it. We don't care. Have that one too. But then he takes the water and that's the sacred thing. That's a funny idea if Indiana Jones is doing it, I think. But
absolutely.
But they're also
it would probably also be racist in Indiana Jones because the film it's riffing on is Temple of Doom and
right.
Yeah.
And so it's too bad. And then also the bumbling Arab terrorists who they mentioned are Mujahideen, which I thought was very funny in retrospect because the Mujahideen sort of split and became the Taliban at one point.
Right.
Part of the Mujahideen. And they're also the quote heroes of Rambo 3.
Exactly. I was just going to say that. You stole it out of my mouth. Yeah.
It's like something went wrong. And in this
Rambo 3 dedicated to
the brave soldiers of the Mujahideen.
Yes.
And it's so funny that in this cinematic universe, they've fallen on such hard times that they're trying to steal shit from Jackie Chan only a couple years later.
But aside from that stuff, like the action is legitimately great. And as you say, it's maybe a more stunt than action driven movie. This one, I love the whole sequence in the underground base. I mean, he's looking for Nazi gold. Basically, is the setup.
Yeah.
And I love the completely useless bits of equipment that are there purely to facilitate sequences, like the 3 tilting platforms that he has to have a fight on. Like those aren't there for any other reason than that staging.
Right.
But it's a great sequence. It's a really good fight. The wind turbine sequence is terrific, and there's some great stuff in the NGs of that with them blowing a high pressure air hose on Jackie's face, which is very, very funny.
Yeah, him trying to fight somebody while that's happening is very funny.
But yeah, I do prefer the longer version because again, you get more of the action, and it is more fun in that respect. But like the first one, there's a lot of stuff to plod through on this one. I think it's slightly better than the original Armor of God, but not by a whole lot. And it's not his finest hour.
No, and the experience wore him out. Really, like he hasn't properly directed another film until what, like 2011?
That is the other thing. He this one was his longest production. It took 2 years.
Oh,
big set pieces. I can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I say, just that hotel set piece alone, I can imagine that's 3 months right there. It's just incredible in terms of the destruction that it unleashes on that hotel and the fights that are going on in there. But I struggle to think of much aside from the wind turbines and the sort of tilting platforms that really stands out in the way that, like, the fight in the Private Members Club in Project A, or the mall in Police Story,
sure,
or anything like that really do.
I think I just like the idea of Jackie Chan as Indiana Jones.
My favorite script detail is that the blonde actress, I cannot remember her name, her grandfather, we find out, was betrayed and murdered by Nazis, but he was also a Nazi, and he was going to betray and murder them. and then the fact that he is full on praising Rommel in his diary, and willingly tricked bodyguards into taking cyanide So it's like when she's like, "Oh no, my grandfather, he has a knife in his back." It's like I would have put a knife in his back too. He seems like a bad man. And then the good Nazi that helps them in the end, he's played by a guy named Aldo Sembrell, who is in a million spaghetti westerns as like basically unnamed thugs and stuff like that. So
I know
that
I've
was
seen
an
him
exciting.
before. Yeah.
Yeah, that was an
The blonde
exciting one.
actress, by the way, is Eva Kobo.
Yeah, who I don't know if she was in much else Hong Kong wise.
And
Not a
the other
lot,
actors
no.
are Carol Cheng, or Carol Dodo Cheng, and Shoko Ikeda.
Yeah.
Are the other actresses. As for Eva Kobo,
Yeah, she was
no,
definitely in the
doesn't look like
Almodovar
her.
film. I recognized
she
her.
is in a film called The Legend of Wisely, which she's also in Matador.
Yeah.
But she
Interesting.
is in The Legend of Wisely, which is the same leading character, as I understand, as The Seventh Curse, which is one of the madder things to have come out of Hong Kong.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I love. Jim, have you ever seen The Seventh?
Yes.
We watched it for New Year's one year over Zoom with
Patrick.
and
Yeah.
Barry.
Yeah.
And once they got to the fetus mashing machine or the baby mashing machine. Yeah, that's a great movie.
Maybe I'll do that this year for New Year's. That'd be fun.
It's pretty fun.
I haven't seen it for a while. That sounds like a plan.
And that's one that's not getting a U.S. release still for some reason, and I keep thinking I gotta import that to have a nice looking version of it.
Yeah, 88 put out a good Blu-ray of that.
Yeah,
nice. Well, I do want to spend just a brief amount of time like highlighting, a film that that isn't directed by Jackie Chan, that we all think you absolutely have to see. And for my money, and you already mentioned it too, Sam, when we were messaging each other, but I don't know if it gets much better than Drunken Master 2, right?
Well,
it's my favorite.
Yeah.
Let's discuss the crediting here.
Okay.
Because on IMDb, he is credited as a co-director. And he definitely directed some of this film. Now, on the print, it's credited as directed by Lau Kar Leung, who started the film, but there were, significant creative differences between him and Jackie Chan. And towards the end of production, Jackie took over the production. I feel like you can see the join, to be honest. But yeah, this is just from IMDb. Among their disagreements, Lau Kar Leung had a particular style of filming that involved quick tracking shots, slow motion, the use of wide angle lenses to play with perspective, which Chan didn't appreciate. Lau wanted to have more of the realistic Hungar style of fighting, whereas Chan felt fans wanted more of the drunken style. And Lau Kar Leung wanted to use wires during the fight scenes, to which Jackie was categorically opposed. And Jackie took over as director, at the very least, for the final fight sequence. I think you can see him in quite a lot of the rest of it, directorially speaking, particularly the more slapstick sequences.
Sure.
With Anita Mui. But the reason I think, even if all he directed ultimately was the final fight, is that's one of the best things that he's ever been involved in.
Absolutely.
And it took 4 months.
4 months. Yeah. That's wild. Wow.
Well, I can imagine Lau Kar Leung was getting pretty old at that point. He was definitely he had been choreographing since the 50s, maybe 60s, early 60s. I've become a really big Lau Kar Leung fan recently. I always liked this movie and Tiger on the Beat, which is one of the greatest movies ever made. But it wasn't until I started getting all these Shaw Brothers things to review that I realized how much I really appreciated his version of the sort of Shaw formula more than even Chang Che. And just there's his way of doing things is something I really liked. But yeah, he would have been aging at the time, and he would have probably had I mean, the whole reason he stopped making movies with Chang-Chi is because he wanted more control. So I can imagine it being kind of awkward working with someone of Jackie Chan's level who's already directed, produced, and starred in all these other movies. It's not like working. Well, from what I understand, Sammo Hung kind of took over Project A. That he was sort of like Golden Harvest's backup plan if Chan started like going over time and budget, is they were going to just squeeze Hung in there to kind of fix it, or just make it end, I guess. But I mean, I don't know. I get it. I can see what you're talking about for sure. That there is a sort of difference as the movie goes on.
Yeah. I think you see it really clearly in like the classical styling of the fight sequences that actually involve Lau Kar-leung, who plays an elder fighter who fights Jackie and fights alongside him at various points in the film. And those sequences are more sort of Shaw Brothers styled, more classical, a bit more placed, and some of that is down to that they're not drunken style, but also it's definitely a stylistic difference. I'm aggrieved that Jackie has changed his stance on wires, certainly.
It is interesting to me that Lau would be interested in wires, but I guess because Yuen Wu-ping was starting to get success with wire work.
Maybe there is still some wired stuff in even the final fight. There are some wire pulls for like harder falls and things like that, but there's nothing. It's not making him. He's not doing a bigger jump because he's on wires.
Yeah, and that's that Yuen Wu-ping like sort of Iron Monkey. Tai Chi Master has this sort of superhero thing. It's a very different kind of martial arts movie that I also really like. But
some of it I'm fine with. I don't. Actually, I mentioned Crouching Tiger earlier. I actually don't love the action in that. I don't love the sort of floaty style very much.
It's definitely lacking some weight. Except for that fight between Yo and.
That's the best action in that movie.
That's fantastic. But I think Iron Monkey and Tai Chi Master are two of my all-time favorite Hong Kong movies, and they are but they also have a brutality to them, I suppose, that kind of changes up what you're feeling. They're because like these people are superpowered, but they're also capable of major violence. Whereas in Crouching Tiger and later movies like that. What was the one that Chan and Lee did? Forbidden Kingdom, which I didn't think was a terrible movie as a like American kids movie, but there's definitely this sort of weightlessness to everything that happens in that movie.
Yeah,
it's more like
I'm not trying to do Crouching Tiger down in a big way.
No, I understand.
It's not entirely my style. It's brilliantly executed for what it is.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
No.
Oh yeah, I get that.
No, but like
I'm just trying to picture Lau Kar-leung with wires, and I didn't know he. I mean, but yeah, I mean, I guess he thought that was the way that the breeze was flowing,
right.
So he had to get involved. I guess it makes sense. Yeah.
No, but like the final confrontation
really
in Drunken Master 2, though, is just as good as it gets. Like, just
before we get to that, can I just mention how much I love Anita Mui in this film?
Oh, yeah, of course.
It's so funny because she's his mother, his stepmother.
Yeah.
And he's actually 9 years older than her in real life, I think. 8 or 9 years older than her in real life.
But she's so funny in this movie.
Yeah.
She is like a living cartoon in this film.
And so different from Miracles.
Yeah, and obviously from Rouge and Heroic Trio as well.
Yeah.
But like every single thing she does, or he says to her, is accompanied with she's almost. There's almost a little Jim Carrey to her in this movie. She's so like rubber faced in it,
Yeah, I can see that.
And like every moment of it, I just think is a treat, is really, really funny. And I look at that, and I look at Rouge, and I look at Miracles, and I just go, I mean, as tragic as any early death is, like how much we lost when she passed away at the age of 40 is just, it's terrible. It's tragic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I adore her performance in this. It might be a bit broad for people, but like there's a way to do that level of broad and I think she nails it perfectly, you know. And it really plays in nicely to when Jackie is doing the drunken style of kung fu. The first sequence where he's doing that and she keeps throwing him alcohol so he can get more and more drunk is absolutely hilarious. But the control that he has, even when he's doing the drunken kung fu style, is just so incredible.
I know.
To me.
Yeah. And just like again, like what we get towards the end with the warehouse, and just like, you know, even just throwing in fire at times, I was just like, ooh, you know, like that's insane.
What's the actor that he's going up against at the end there?
It's his bodyguard, in fact. Ken Lowe.
Ken Lowe, right?
Ken Lowe, yeah. Oh, he's a great final boss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is kind of like set up that whole sequence is like a video game.
It absolutely is. I love Ken Lowe was known as a kicker, and just the dexterity of his kicks and his legs in this movie is just incredible. There's a time where, you know, that sort of reload of his arms that Henry Cavill does in Mission Impossible 6. There's a couple of moments where you almost get Ken Lowe doing that with his legs in this movie. It's great.
Yeah. He's at least, I know exactly what you're talking about.
But yeah, that sequence, as I say, it took 4 months to shoot, and it's incredibly death-defying. Jackie is on fire more than once. But, you know, obviously the main big set-piece stunt of that is when he gets kicked into and crawls through a pit of hot coals. And that's not fake.
No.
Oh my Lord.
And he did it twice because he wasn't happy with the first one.
Yeah.
Jackie, you're insane. Oh.
It's suicidally insane.
Yeah, I know.
I just but it is, again, I just keep coming back to the fact that you can't fake this stuff. But I think in this one, when you're talking about directorially, I think it's interesting to see, because, as I say, I think you can see the joins, the differences and the refinements of the almost opposing styles to me. You know, like Lau Kar Leung's is very, generally speaking, very is a bit more formal and a bit more placed, and Jackie is very wild and abandoned, and that's partly because I think Jackie was mainly doing the drunken kung fu stuff, but also like just philosophical differences, and this is another one where he isn't doing a lot of the big stunt work. There's a lot of stunt work. You know, there's a great sequence where he breaks a massive bamboo pole and attacks a whole lot of people with it, and, you know, the sharp edges all over it, and they are falling out of a building when they're doing that, and that's all incredible stuff. And again, you know, can't fake that. But other than the hot coals thing, there's not one big stunt for him. But it's welcome in a lot of ways to see, after years of the big stunt work, and particularly like looking at Armor of God 2 and stuff like that, and, you know, Police Story 3, which he had recently done at that point, getting back to the grounded fighting is actually a really cool thing to see in this movie, I think. And yeah, I think there are better films that we've talked about, but mainly because of the sort of mismatch in styles. But, you know, this is right up there. Again, it's in my top 10 Jackie Chan movies.
As well it should be, because I adore it. Yeah.
It benefited from Miramax not fucking with it very much too. It got a decently, I remember it getting a release at a time when there weren't a lot of other things in theaters. So like I knew a lot of people who actually went and saw it. And I don't know if they edited anything out. They definitely changed the music, but they must have edited something out. And Harvey Weinstein wouldn't allow anything to go with that.
Was this after Super Cop and First Strike? And
I think that it went. Super Cop was like the first one when they went, okay, this one would work with American audiences. I think it was after First Strike too. I think you're right.
Yeah.
I don't remember
well, no, it's not after First Strike, because First Strike is Police Story 4.
Right,
okay.
Right. But I mean,
in terms of the
U.S. re-release. Because
I see.
I think First Strike was actually a pseudo new movie that was then re-edited and released in the U.S., and that Police Story 3 and what they called Legend of the Drunken Master were two of the ones that they dug deeper. And then Tarantino talked them into doing Iron Monkey, which was a much older movie at the time.
But yeah, I think, that's the last film that he directed on up until 2011. And, he's only directed once, twice kind of, since Drunken Master 2. And I don't know, I think on the evidence of Chinese Zodiac, maybe not. But I think it's a shame because I think there are not many people who you can pinpoint and go, oh, look, he invented a genre.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And Jackie Chan, love him or hate him, is one of those people. He's, even if he's not your favorite director or one of them, he is somebody who needs recognition more as a director because he's an innovator as a filmmaker. He didn't entirely create kung fu comedy, but he codified it in a lot of ways, I think.
He certainly brought it into the mainstream, and broke through in a way that made me excited about this genre at a time when my love of cinema was developing. So for that reason alone, I'm just grateful to have discovered him at a young age, and certainly covering him on this show and going back to films I'd never even seen before and just seeing, like the template or just where he got his start and how it evolved over time, and seeing ups and downs, but mostly ups, like I can't really say I've was able to extensively watch everything that he's done. You two have a lot more, but
I mean, I've watched a lot of the stuff. Honestly, I hadn't seen 3 of the movies I think I had seen Fearless Hyena, but it had been so long that I might as well have not seen it. But I had never seen Young Master or Miracles. I, in fact, had been told mostly that Miracles wasn't worth seeing. So I'm kind of glad that.
Yeah, I'm glad I saw it too.
Yeah, because it's definitely better than some of its reputation. I think the reputation, unfortunately, comes from people who are very hardcore into the kung fu aspects of the movies and not anything else.
So yeah, aside from Crime Story, where he's also uncredited, and I can't find anything as specific as what's been said about Drunken Master 2 in terms of what he directed on it or may have directed or not on it, and the sort of autobiographical My Story and My Stunts documentaries. I watched his entire directorial filmography for this, which is 14 movies without those. And I think the initial run is just insane. Yeah, Armor of God is a little bit of a blip, but otherwise, Fearless Hyena, Young Master, Dragon Lord, Project A, and Police Story, that 5-movie run,
unreal,
unmatched in kung fu cinema potentially.
I mean, I really like some of those Lau Kar Long movies, but I honestly don't know if I could look at. I would have to look.
No, I would wonder if he put up 5 in a row,
right? And that's
like
I can't think of the order of things. So yeah, I mean, I love Yuan Wuping, but he has some stinkers in between the good ones for sure. That's the only other guy I would be particularly excited about who does primarily martial arts cinema.
Yeah, I'd be.
I mean, I would have to look at.
Sammo Hung might. Sammo Hung might.
Yeah, I would have to look again.
He did those comedies I hate, so never mind. I keep forgetting about those.
The early ones that I thought had funny titles, like Encounters of the Spooky Kind.
No, that one's good.
Oh, okay.
That one's good. That's an important. That's a great movie, Jim, and that's an important movie too.
Oh,
Without
good.
that,
I'm going to have to watch
Mr.
that.
Vampire.
Yeah, and Mr. Vampire is great.
Yeah, Mr. Vampire is like one of my all-time favorite movies, and yeah, I don't think you'd have Mr. Vampire. You probably wouldn't have Chinese Ghost Story without that movie existing. Probably wouldn't have Zoo Warriors without that movie existing, which we just covered on my podcast.
Yeah, again, that's kind of a movie that like unlocks a whole genre or subgenre, certainly. Of like kung fu horror and ghost movies, and there's some Shaw Brothers stuff that did it as well, but in a particular like comedy vein as well. Yeah, but yeah, as I say, I just think Jackie gets his credit due as a martial artist, as a stuntman, as a movie star, not so much as an actor, because, traditionally speaking, how much of an actor is he? But, I think it's really time, and that's why I'm glad as I said, that we did it on this podcast, that we talk about him more as a director and as a super interesting and innovative director as well.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I learned a lot too. I mean, it's just learning how long he would take to shoot certain scenes, and just his attention to detail, like I always mention, as being a strength of any director. But just all these movies are just acrobatic feast for the eyes, and just seeing his dexterity. But like even if Miracles didn't quite click with me as a whole, there's just gorgeous things about it, and just like we talked about, the cinematography. Like I am thoroughly impressed with him as a director now, having watched all of these. So I'm grateful for that, and I'm glad that you brought him to the Directors Club here, Sam. That's a good pick. I wasn't expecting it, really. That was a surprise.
The rumor has long been that he and his stunt team directed most of the action scenes in the Rush Hour movies. That Ratner just left it to him. So I don't know if we want to even bring up those movies, but I think they would almost count in his, because I mean that's the one good thing about those movies, right? Is the fighting scenes, and to tell you the truth, I've only seen the first two, so I couldn't tell you. But yeah, I'm not a big fan either.
Nah.
I would assume he also did most of the with the stunt team, the direction for the Shanghai Night and.
Those movies were fun. They were okay.
I think those were directors who knew their limitations, and to just hand off that part to the guy.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Like I think Shanghai Noon is probably and one of the better of that set of movies. Probably the best of that era of his American stuff.
Yeah,
still not great.
Yeah, I don't know if I really like any of them. Like I said, I remember watching Forbidden Kingdom and saying, this is an okay kids film, but it's not what I want.
Yeah, I don't think I've even got that on my list because I haven't seen it recently enough to actually remember it. But, the thing is, though, he ended his current directorial career with a stinker that is worse than almost any of his American films.
Wow.
Which is Chinese Zodiac, which is absolutely terrible. It's the third Armor of God film. And, I don't know, if you can say anything in its favor, at least it gets where it's going nice and quickly. The first proper fight scene happens just 87 minutes in.
What? Oh, my. Yeah. No, thanks. Well, we know what to skip.
Yeah.
And it's a good fight scene. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
There's some really nice creative stuff with. It's in a sort of photography studio for some reason. But there's some nice stuff with a big picture frame that he goes through and getting photographed in the middle of the fight. By an automatic camera. That's quite fun, playful stuff. And it's overcut, but he's in his mid to late 50s at this point. And it's fine, but it's the only sort of good sequence in the whole movie. There's an okay sequence at the beginning, which is kind of an action sequence, but not a fight. But other than that, it's a real waste of time, and like even less fun than by a long shot than the other two Armor of God films in between the action. It's really pretty dreadful and quite propagandistic as well.
Ugh.
Who directed Police Story 3? Stanley Tong directed it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think that
you worked
that's
with him a lot.
Yeah. That's the other quintessential, if you want to understand Jackie Chan here. Watch this, and you don't...
Police Story 3 vies with Police Story as my favorite overall.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think, again, Tong probably handled mostly the stuff that isn't action. And
right.
I'm sure, Jackie is the action director on that, and I'm sure he is responsible for most of what was going on there. But, again, that's not really documented, so and Tong is the credited director.
It makes sense, though, especially since he worked with Tong several times.
Right. Yeah.
He would work with someone who would give him clearance. Tong, the director of the live-action Mr. Magoo movie.
Ooh. Speaking of Leslie Nielsen.
I haven't seen Mr. Magoo, but his last film with Jackie is an absolute stinker as well, which is Kung Fu Yoga.
Oh, yeah, I've heard only bad things about that one.
Well, the title makes me laugh.
Yeah.
Well, this was great, guys. I am so grateful for the both of you because I feel like I learned a lot. I have a lot to add to my watch list as a result of this conversation. It was so much fun. Let's learn about where everybody can follow and find you and all that good stuff. Sam, we'll start with you. Just tell everybody where you're at and what we can look forward to from you in the future.
Well, like I said, I do a couple of podcasts at the moment. I have a show about Jennifer Jason Leigh. Reviewing her and analyzing her films pretty much one at a time, most of the time, with my friend Jason Shawn. And that is called Fearless Pretender. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for that. You can find me on my new show with my friend Bede. That's Bede, if we're not sure. And we have a show about the Video Nasties, appropriately called Bede and Sam versus the Video Nasties, where we are reviewing each of the films on the British DPP list, the Video Nasties list. We have just started that as we're recording this with the film Absurd, but we're going to go through every single one of those movies.
Which you can legally now.
Mostly.
Almost. Have you seen them before? I'm actually curious. Or would some of these be first time?
It's funny. I've seen, before we started, I had seen, I think, 93 of the 143. And Bede had seen the exact reverse ratio. So, there's a lot that I've seen, but a lot still to see.
It's amazing how unoffensive some of them are.
Some of them are 15s here now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. Yeah, it's a very funny thing to look back on. I went through a period where I was going to collect them all, and there were so many of them. There were such awful movies that I just talked myself out of it.
There's some terrible stuff on the list. We've recorded one of them that I think is absolutely awful. I mean, there's a lot of really great movies on that list too, and
let me know when you get to the one where the werewolf rips. Or the Bigfoot rips the guy's dick off. That
sounds fun. Wild, but that is a fun movie.
Yeah, it's a really fun movie. I genuinely enjoy that movie.
It's rubbish.
I can't remember what it's called.
I've forgotten. I didn't. Night of the Demon.
Night of the Demon. It's a totally generic. Yeah, and the VHS box doesn't show a Bigfoot. So you have no idea what it's about.
And of course, there's a better film by that title as well.
Right, yeah.
So I do that. I also quite frequently guest on other people's podcasts, often for my friends Bede and Marcy over at the Super Network, which you can find at supermarcy.com. I hopefully have got a couple of things coming up with them as we're talking. Watch this space for more stuff potentially. Yeah. And if you want to follow me, I'm 24 FPS UK on both Blue Sky and Letterboxd.
Excellent. I will definitely link to those in the show notes. And how about you, Gabe? What are you up to?
Well, my podcast and review website, which is mostly Blu-ray 4K reviews, it's called Genre Grinder. Jim's been a guest usually at least once a year.
Yay.
I can't remember what we have planned for this year, but the next thing I'm planning now is Patrick and I are doing, we do a 1 year in some sort of specific genre when it peaked. And unfortunately, peaked means the most movies came out. And this time it is spaghetti westerns. They peaked in 1968, which doesn't mean the genre peaked. It just means there were most of them. So there are some kind of bad movies we ended up watching, but it was still fun. That's been taking up most of my time. And I can be found at genregrinder.com. There's a Genre Grinder Facebook page. There is a Genre Grinder, actually, I should say its Instagram is Genre Grinder Gabe on Instagram. And I am now on Blue Sky as just Gabe Powers. And I'm also on Letterboxd as just Gabe Powers.
Everybody follow Gabe as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, not a lot of people have moved over to Blue Sky from my Twitter. My Blue Sky account is pretty...
It'll take a while, yeah.
My count is weak.
Well, we don't have to include this, but Gabe, if you're interested, just follow me on Blue Sky. And I've started a list for martial arts film fans and critics.
Okay, well, I mean, that's good because most of the reviews now are the Shaw Brothers sets. So it's a lot of martial arts stuff on my page right now, actually.
Excellent. Yeah, no,
cool.
I'm excited. I good Lord. There's so much to look forward to from the both of you, and including this show, which, we got the best of 2024 episode coming with Bill Ackerman, and that's always a highlight and inevitably the most downloaded episode of the year, just because people are probably just really curious about what to add to their watch list or see if they agree with us on the best films of the year. So that's what we always look forward to at the start of January, as well as a nice, lovely Directors Club tradition of having my partner come on, and her choice for January is Elaine May. So that'll be nice and simple with only 4 movies. But at the same time, it's just, there's a lot I'm looking forward to, including the fact that now everything is going to be available through Substack. directorsclub.substack.com is where you find writing, this podcast, and anything related to what I'm working on. It just felt, it made sense to me to just finally find one home for everything instead of having it spread out across multiple platforms and even a website. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad I've done it. It's been the right choice. So good things to look forward to in the new year. Visit directorsclubpodcast.com and you can send me an email, directorsclubpodcast@gmail.com, and all that good stuff. We'll see you soon for the best of 2024 episode and a nice, lovely short episode with my partner Sharon as we talk about Elaine May. So thanks everybody, and thanks again Sam and Gabe for being on the show. This was such a blast. All right, we'll wrap it up here. Woohoo!
Cheers, man. That was fun.
Cool.
I must be dreaming, you're too good to be true. Who could imagine there be someone like you? So near perfection is hard to believe. All I've ever wanted, all I ever need. Somewhere in heaven where the heart's ever free. I know the angels keep I watch over me, for they have sent me an angel like you. Are you an illusion? Am I just a fool? Show me what to do.